Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Erica Stewart, and I'm here as the mayor. And we have Councilmember Francis on the Zoom. Hi, all. Hi. I never like to use this thing. Councilmember Francis, is there anyone else over 18 present with you in your room?
There is not.
Thank you so much. And council, do you approve to have her participate via Zoom due to her family emergency?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Okay, we'll go ahead and call the regular meeting to order and state that all members are present short of via Zoom for our Councilmember Francis. And I'll go ahead and lead the council in the Pledge of Allegiance. If you can, are able, or wish to, please stand. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At 4:30, we were in a closed session, and City Attorney, do you mind reporting out?
Mayor, there we go. Council did meet in closed session on one item of anticipated litigation. The facts and circumstances supporting that were included on the agenda, and that related to a fee protest series of letters from Avila Ranch developers related to development impact fees, and there was no reportable action taken on that matter.
Thank you. Well, one of the fun parts about these meetings is the proclamations and welcoming people into the city. And so today we have a Surveyors Week. In a little bit, we'll have James A. Cooper receive the proclamation for Surveyors Week. So I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll meet you down there at the podium. So whereas the honorable and historic profession of land surveying combines the art of making measurements with the science of mathematics and has provided answers to the questions of land boundary determination since the earliest days of civilization. And surveyors were instrumental in the formation of property boundaries of the United States, which have provided our citizens the enjoyment of property ownership. It is the professional land surveyor who is uniquely qualified to determine and describe land and water boundaries for the management of natural resources and protection of private and public property rights. The surveying profession requires special education and training, mathematic skills, related physical and applied sciences, and knowledge of the requirements of the law for evidence. Practicing within the city of San Luis Obispo are a great number of professional land surveyors. Professional land surveyors continue to contribute to the city's priorities of public safety and high-performing public service, helping enhance the quality of life for those who live, learn, work, and play in our city. Now, therefore, I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby recognizes the achievements of and contribution by the members of the local land surveying community, recognize the week of March 19th through March 25th as National Surveyors Week.
All right, thank you, Mayor Stewart. Again, my name is James Cooper, and I'm a Deputy County Surveyor over with the County of San Luis Obispo. I'm deeply honored to be here to accept this proclamation on behalf of all of the land surveyors in the city and in the county. Land surveying is a profession that works for the public, and it really rarely gets talked about, but I can guarantee that you've all seen us out there. Have you ever seen somebody looking through like a weird looking camera on a tripod in a bright orange vest, or perhaps walking down the road with a rod with a mirror or a GPS unit on top? Well, those are land surveyors, and we're out there working tirelessly for the betterment of society. As you mentioned, surveyors have been responsible for defining property boundary lines, mapping out infrastructure, and ensuring safe and efficient development of our cities and towns for thousands of years. From the ancient Egyptians to past presidents such as Washington and Lincoln, and the modern era, surveyors today. And while the tools of land surveying have dramatically changed, our role in society has remained consistent. With the inclusion of technology such as 3D scanning and aerial drones, our profession has been able to incorporate these into our practices to really increase our accuracy and efficiency. Lastly, I just want to say thank you again for giving us this proclamation for this week and bringing a little bit of attention to the profession of land surveying. And next time you see us out there in our bright orange vests, feel free to stop by, say hi, and ask us what it means to be a land surveyor and what it could take to become one. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Well, next we were going to welcome Fire Chief Todd Tuggle to introduce his new staff. However, due to illness, we're going to postpone that introduction. So hopefully we'll see you at the next meeting. Next, we have Community Development Director Michael Codron, and I believe he'll be introducing the new staff.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. Yes, I have 2 new staff members in the Community Development Engineering Development Review Division that I'm really happy to introduce to you tonight. I'm going to start with Brian. Brian Rodriguez received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Cal Poly. And after a tour of duty with the city in the City Public Works Department, Brian brought his skills to community development, just moved a couple of files over at 919, where he is responsible for working closely with private property developers on their subdivision improvements, and as well as helping them comply with the city's drainage design manual and flood damage prevention regulations. So very important in the context of the rainy weather that we're having this season. Brian lives in Santa Maria with his wife and 3 beautiful children, so you can imagine how busy he is when he's not at work doing plan check and other duties, coaching baseball, soccer, and any other activities that his family are involved in. So thank you. I'm happy to welcome Brian to the team.
Council member and City Mayor, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm normally not here to boast myself or anything. I'm actually here because Hal's been here with the city for 35 years, and I look up to him and I admire him. And they say that to be a professional or to master your profession, you have to work for and learn that profession for like 5 years. Well, Hal's been doing that for 7 times with the city. So it's just great to be here and be a part of seeing Hal get recognized for his service to the community and just his knowledge and ability to just kind of pull some things from his brain, which seem like hard to know, but that's what happens when you have somebody working for the city for that long. And I could only aspire to that and be a public service to the city. Thank you.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you.
All right, thank you, Brian. Next up is Nate Stong, and Nate is our acting supervising civil engineer. So Nate lives in San Luis Obispo, and he's returning to public service to work for the city that he calls home. Nate was the city engineer for the city of Placerville from 2008 to 2014. And as the acting supervising civil engineer, Nate manages Brian and a team of 5 engineers and technicians. As the supervisor, Nate plays a critical role in the space between public works and community development. So as private developers complete their public improvements and turn those over to the city for long-term maintenance, Nate is right there to make sure that things are working smoothly, and of course has taken his cues from Hal, who is the supervising civil engineer, and we have a little bit of period of overlap here, which is very nice. Nate enjoys spending time with his 2 sons, camping, gardening, and assembling computers, as well as hiking. So that's what he likes to do outside of work. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to work for the city I've been living in, and went to school at Cal Poly in the late 90s, and being able to work here is certainly a privilege, and look forward to helping guide development in the path that will be an asset to future generations. And what can I say? I've got, as Brian was saying, really mammoth shoes to fill in Hal. So I'd just like to say a kind word about, or I'm going to probably fall on my face trying to fit into those giant shoes and walk around. So, but I will do my best. I look forward to serving the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Nate. And Mayor Stewart, if I could just take one more moment, I'd like to invite Mr. Hal Hanula up. This isn't on your agenda because I think if it was, he wouldn't be here. So
We know.
But I want to highlight that we did receive agenda correspondence on these introductions, and that might be the first time that the council has ever received agenda correspondence on introductions of staff on the agenda. And if you sense some anxiety in the email from Ms. Gail Riff, I can assure you that we share that anxiety. The Engineering Development Review Team is going through an important transition with the retirement of Hal Hanula, a 35-year city employee. Hal will be impossible to replace, and so Gail's anxiety is our anxiety, but we do have a detailed plan in place, and Nate is an important part of that. But for tonight, I'm pleased simply to thank Hal for his incredible 35-year commitment to the city, where he promoted through our organization to his current role and is largely thought of as being indispensable due to his great knowledge of city development matters. But his children and his grandchildren await. And so I want to conclude with the presentation of a plaque presented to Hal Hanula with sincere appreciation for over 35 years of dedicated service to the San Luis Obispo community. October 1st, 1987 to March 31st, 2023. Congratulations on your retirement.
Wow, thank you, Mayor Stewart, council, all that are here tonight, and the public maybe watching online. It's been an honor and privilege to serve the city of San Luis Obispo. I can't look at Derek and Christine and my colleagues without, trying to hold back tears, but it's been a great run. I'm really encouraged at the next generation of employees. You got just 2 introduced tonight, but I look around me and we're hiring the best and the brightest, and I'm so encouraged. The city's doing everything right, the community outreach, inviting all stakeholders to all our conversations, and taking care of the environment, taking care of development, taking care of our economy. I'm just so impressed, not only a long-term city worker, but a citizen of this town, and I'm super encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for that wonderful surprise, Mr. Cadron. That was wonderful to see Hal and be able to get a little bit of recognition for all the amazing work he's done. So, City Manager, did you have anything else to add to that?
I'll have a lot to say to Hal, but I'll save that for another day. But we have done some amazing things, and Hal has left an indelible imprint on this city. You cannot look around the city, and there is not something that Hal hasn't touched. And Hal is one of those people that stands up for what is right. And every time I have an interaction with a developer, most of the time they tell me, that Hal made my project better. And that, to me, is always a mark of a true professional. And so we'll talk more about that, Hal, at the appropriate time, but we will all miss you.
Well, thank you. Well, next we have the City Manager report, so you can just go ahead and put your mic back on and we'll move on to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, this picture up here on the screen really tells a lot about the last 3 months. I think I read today we've had 12 atmospheric rivers that have moved through California, and that is a record. And so I think we're at nearly 40 inches of rain, and so we always try to see the bright side of things, and so we were blessed to have this rainbow. but it's not been always rainbows over the last few months. And I want to thank the Public Works team and the rest of the team been doing a lot of hard work in keeping our community safe. There's been a lot of projects out there that you'll be seeing. So we really appreciate the public's patience while we try to make a series of repairs, whether it's in parks and roads or creeks or to buildings. You know, your patience and your grace will hopefully give us the space to then hopefully get our community back to where we need it to be. So with that, I'll advance to the next slide and just talk about a couple exciting things that we've been successful in pursuing on behalf of the city of SLO. I want to share an exciting announcement that we received a grant of nearly $6 million from Proposition 1 for our groundwater cleanup program. And this is thanks to the hard work of our utilities department. The project consists of preparing a FATE and transport groundwater model to clean up some of the contamination plumes and siting and construction of 2 extraction and treatment wells and the installation of a minimum of 8 monitoring wells to monitor the long-term progress of treatment within the city of San Luis Obispo. We anticipate that this work will be completed by mid-2025. So just to be clear, this is to clean up a lot of our groundwater. We don't use groundwater today, but it will be a viable source through the funding of this grant and the cleanup of this of the groundwater. Secondarily, I want to talk about a grant we received from the Air Pollution Control District for nearly $500,000 to install 2 level 3 charge point stations down at the Corp Yard for our 2 first electric buses. So we were fortunate to receive funding to purchase 2 electric buses. And so these will be some of our first pilot vehicles to really accommodate and grow our fleet to a more sustainable future. And these electric chargers really make this happen. And so thanks to the Public Works team again and our talented transit team for pulling together the funding to make this happen. Lastly, I want to share some good news. We partnered with SLO City Farm and received a $200,000 grant from the Department of Conservation, which will provide for enhancement of the Perfumo Creek. And the enhancement project will restore 2.5 acres of the Perfumo Creek corridor, enhance the agricultural viability of the SLO City Farm. It will remove some invasive species along the creek. It'll install some trees and then 1,200 feet of English ivy and provide other stabilizing efforts throughout that riparian corridor, in addition to installing some fencing that will provide some security for SLO City Farms as well. And you recall that was one of the asks that SLO City Farms made on behalf of and during the budget process. So we're excited to add these funding sources to known needs within our city. Moving on, I want to talk a little bit about some of the efforts in the Parks and Recreation program. You know that we hosted the annual Leprechaun Lost. It was hosted on March 16th at the Farmers Market. I talked about that at the last City Council meeting. I want to just report we had 250 kids participate in the scavenger hunt at Farmers Market to track down a lucky 7 clues to win prizes. It was a big hit, a lot of fun time happening that day down at the Farmers Market. I want to share some other upcoming events. So we've got, moving to the next slide, the Garden Tea Party. And you can spend the afternoon with the Rotary Community Garden at Meadow Park for Garden Tea. It's on March 31st from 11 to 2. You can spend an hour with a representative from the SLO Masters Gardeners and enjoy a presentation on container gardening, including hands-on activity to let everyone make herb pots with herb seedlings and edible flowers. After the lesson, you can enjoy iced tea, lemonade. There'll be some mini sandwiches that are catered by SLO Provisions. The event is for seniors and active adults, 55 and older, and the cost is $10. And you can reach out to Hadley Clegg at the Parks and Recreation Department. Also want to share for the community the SLO Fire Department badge pinning ceremony at Fire Station 1. This is to celebrate our 2023 Recruit Academy graduates and our recent promotions. That academy is winding down. It has been a very intense 10 weeks of training. Their last day will be April 6th and graduation will be on April 7th. There are 7 recruits, 6 are paramedics, which you know, we have been short throughout California, and so we're excited to add this. And we're really also very excited that one of which is our first female firefighter since 1997. Adding some more update on SLO storms recovery. We're in the middle of the recovery process with 2 separate disasters. The council affirmed 2 proclamations that were made by myself as acting as the Emergency Services Director. We are proceeding through the FEMA Public Assistance Program for the January storms and are in the midst of initial damage assessment on emergency-related work on the March storms. The March emergency work includes bank erosion at San Luis Drive that has resulted in the closure of the sidewalk and parking, and then some substantial amount of debris removal on the Perfumo Creek arm near the Laguna Lake inflow. You may have heard about some of that work that was happening this last weekend. Staff are also working to differentiate damages and costs associated with the 2 separate disasters. And some recent highlights, we had an in-person recovery scoping meeting with FEMA that was scheduled on Thursday. Staff have reviewed our RFQ, our request for qualifications for recovery services, and working to schedule some interviews. So we're bringing in some outside help to handle the paperwork and to make sure we positioned all of our projects for grants. Some of our priority work moving forward will be to make sure we're continuing to bolster documentation. We'll be looking to differentiate and be able to articulate the damage between the January and the March events. Continued refinement of incurred and anticipated costs. And then lastly, I know the community has been very eager to volunteer. And so we do have a new volunteer coordinator, and we'll be looking to leverage volunteer opportunities in the community. We just haven't had the right conditions yet in the creek to make that happen. Another pieces of our response is that we're coordinating with insurance coverage that is provided from the California Joint Powers Authority. And then we're preparing for our FEMA recovery scoping meeting that I mentioned this Thursday. So a lot happening on floods. Very thankful for all the team. Very thankful today that it appears that the rain has been lighter than the past few storms. With that, I'd like to invite Bob Hill, our Natural Resources Manager, and talk a little bit about mountain lions. I know that there's been a subject of interest in our community and just want to share some opportunities to learn more about living with mountain lions and then what we're doing today in partnership with the state.
Thank you, Derek, and good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. I'm Bob Hill, your Sustainability Natural Resources official. First and foremost, I would like to thank your council for your leadership and foresight in creating, along with many other city councils that preceded you, the San Luis Obispo Greenbelt. We have protected thousands of acres of natural lands for habitat in complement to public lands like Los Padres National Forest, Montaña de Oro, and in complement to many of the beautiful natural surrounding farms and ranches, legacy family properties that are still in agricultural production. Collectively in that green belt, that means we have a lot of habitat. And so as a result, from time to time, we have mountain lions, and sometimes they will come into urban areas or what we call our wild and urban interface. In the 10 years I've worked for the city, I've found it to be sort of episodic. There will be times when we hear a lot about it, and then maybe a couple of years will go by and we don't hear much. Right now is one of the times when we're hearing a lot from our residents and neighbors, particularly those that live in the Laguna Lake neighborhood and other areas from time to time as well. So I just really want to let you know that We're aware of that. We understand how concerning that can be. And yet, according to California Department of Fish and Wildlife, statistically speaking, you're more likely to get hit by lightning than you are to be attacked by a mountain lion. It's extremely rare in California. Nevertheless, we understand that that's concerning, particularly with pets, with small children. And so always be aware of your surroundings, go with a buddy, make noise, those kinds of things. It's really valuable to have information. And so reports are valuable to us. Our job is to receive those reports and communicate with our community and our neighbors and report those to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Mountain lions, or Puma concolor, are protected species under the California Endangered Species Act. So as a city, we do not legally have the authority to haze or use other methods to help move or dogs to help move a mountain lion along, or to trap and relocate. So we have to rely on our friends at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. City biologist Freddie Nadi and I, right now, we're in contact on an almost daily basis with our local city biologist colleagues at CDFW. And I can assure you they are handling this matter as a priority. I just spoke with one of their senior biologists this afternoon who let me know that they're very active in continuing to try to trap and relocate this lion to a far, far, far away place where it's not likely to return. The website here where you could report is up here. If you don't have a chance to jot that all down, simply remember wildlife.ca.gov is the website, and you can key in mountain lions and you'll find a lot of great information, lessons learned, activities, things that are going on, science, best practices, those kinds of things. And that's also where you can fill out what's called a wildlife incident report, or we can do that as well. And so be in contact with myself or Freddie Audi. Also wanted to bring attention to an event that's happening this Sunday, hosted by the nonprofit Cougar Conservancy. So this is an educational meeting and for a chance to folks to learn more about coexisting with wildlife in our area. So that's Sunday, March 26th from 2 to 4, hosted at the Courtyard by Marriott, and City Biologist Freddie Audi will attend, and I'm also Parks and Recreation Director Greg Avakian, who of course oversees our Ranger Service personnel, will also be in attendance. So always happy to answer any questions, and thanks for the chance to address you tonight.
Thank you. I do have a quick question. So actually this morning I was just having a conversation with a member of our community, and they were in their backyard gardening, and the mountain lion was closer than between you and I. And so what can I tell people, and what can you tell people if a mountain lion is that close to them, what to do?
Yeah, that's great. I think, again, looking at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's website is chock full of information. But generally speaking, high level, the rules are stand tall, make a lot of noise, back away, don't run away, that kind of thing. And just be aware of your surroundings always. Look around before you enter that kind of an area. Yeah.
Thank you. And is there a phone number as well as the website in case someone?
That's a good question. It may be on the website. I didn't look for that.
Okay.
Happy to put that out there, though. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Schwarzman?
Yeah, I just wanted to check. So if someone sees a mountain lion near their area, or are you looking for that information? Do you want people to report it to us through
Absolutely.
Ask Slow, or?
They can use Ask Slow. They can send it to myself or Freddie Audi. So my email would be rhill@slowcity.org. Freddie's is FOTTE, Faudy@slowcity.org. Or from that website, you can find what's called a wildlife incident report, and that goes directly to Fish and Game. It's part of their larger data repository statewide, so that helps them inform best science, but ultimately that gets back to the local biologist here in San Luis Obispo.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And then with that, I'd invite Chief Scott to come forward and to talk a little bit and kind of just to brief the council on this last weekend's St. Patrick's, St. Friday's Day update. So with that, Chief Scott.
Thank you, City Manager Johnson, and appreciate being here tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council, so allowing me the opportunity to come back and talk to you about the activities over our St. Patrick's Day weekend. So as we had talked about last time I was here, we did experience crowds larger than we've seen historically in recent times, especially due to COVID. Thankfully, we were upstaffed to address that concern, both in our downtown core as well as our neighborhoods. The downtown bars did open at 6 a.m. and were very busy throughout the weekend. We saw, again, a lot of people come and visit downtown, not only for the events on Friday, but all throughout the weekend. We were pretty active downtown. Our safety enhancement zone was active beginning on Friday, and it ran through 7 a.m. on Saturday. A majority of our resources, unfortunately, were focused on the non-sanctioned celebrations on the north end of town in our neighborhoods adjacent to the Cal Poly area. So we saw student organizations hosting a variety of parties, bringing thousands of people into that area specifically. This wasn't unexpected. You know, we had intelligence leading up to these events, and we were staffed accordingly to address the concerns. Early enforcement efforts were beneficial this year, so I'm happy to report that although noise complaints started as early as 4 a.m. due to the parties, we did take advantage of the safety enhancement zone to continue to write citations early and often as much as we could during that time frame. As a precautionary measure, we did end up closing some streets in the northern neighborhoods. This was the Bond Hathaway area. That was precautionary as we saw younger individuals enter the street, begin walking in the street and congregating in the street. So in order to keep vehicular traffic out of the area, we did close neighborhoods about 7 a.m. That continued as crowds swelled throughout the morning. Once things kind of died off, we were able to open up the neighborhood about 10:30 for vehicular traffic. Overall, we didn't experience any significant injuries, virtually no injuries throughout the weekend, which was good. And we didn't have any, of course, any injuries to staff, which was thankful. We had 18 arrests throughout the weekend with nearly 90 citations written from Saturday through Sunday. Again, a majority of these were focused in our neighborhood area. Looking ahead, we're going to continue to do our after-action analysis to see what worked well for us, what did not work well for us, and to make those adjustments looking ahead for next year. We're looking forward to continuing a dialogue with our neighborhood associations, our neighborhood groups that live in that area. I'd like to take this opportunity. You're going to hear from others, I'm quite certain. But I sympathize with the circumstances that they're having to put up with in that area. We have very dedicated staff that focused 14, 16-hour shifts to make sure that everyone was safe. Property was kept safe, but the noise is still unacceptable. And if you live there, it can be very devastating to your peaceful environment. So with that, happy again, we'll do an after-action report, and I'll come back to you to bring any significant changes to our plans looking forward, which I do expect there will be some, but happy to brief you on those in the future. And lastly, just want to give a big thanks to not only our staff, but as well as Cal Poly, who helped us throughout this event to make sure that everybody was safe and that we were able to do our best to safeguard our community as a whole. Happy to answer any questions that you may have of me.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Scott, for that update. I really appreciate it. Do you have any idea what the timeline is on that after action report? I know some folks are going to be eager to plan ahead for next year, and so just curious when we might hear a little bit about what worked and what we anticipate doing differently next year.
Yeah, we'll have some time to work through that. So I expect, obviously before we get into St. Patrick's Day next year, but we're going to have a hot wash with our teams, to hear a first-person perspective on what they experienced in the field. A lot of these, conversations will need to occur both with our staff, both with Cal Poly, and we also want to take time to visit with our neighborhoods to understand exactly what they saw from their perspective. There's lots of video footage that I know is out there. There's some that we're continuing to collect that helps us identify areas that we saw challenges in addressing. And so that's going to take some time. Unfortunately, I just don't have a timeline on when I'll be ready to report back to each of you, but those conversations are already underway with my team.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you just said it, but I wanted to make sure. So with your after action report, that doesn't include Cal Poly at that point, right? That would be after you've analyzed everything?
Correct, but we will be visiting with Cal Poly to understand, because Cal Poly PD also assisted us, and I'll be visiting with their administrators because there's some after-action things that need to occur now. We know the offenders. We know some of the primary offenders in this situation. Those names and the enforcement action that we've already taken will be sent to Cal Poly for follow-up. I'll be very curious to see what the outcome of those situations were and if improvements need to be made on follow-up as well. I'll also take this opportunity to remind those that may be watching, if you were out there, check your mail, because we're continuing to investigate and still send citations for residents that we can identify were part of the problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions? No. Okay. Well,
Thank you very much.
And City Manager, I did have one question about the storm, a part of your report. I noticed on Supervisor Paulding, last Thursday was the last day to apply for FEMA individual assistance, but then you were saying the difference between the two storms, will there be an ability to apply for the next FEMA?
Madam Mayor, let me check on that and get back to the council. I think that is the case. I just, James Butler's been out for a few days. So there's been, if you recall, the declarations that come out, FEMA essentially rolls out a schedule of eligible reimbursable costs. And I don't know if they've made a determination about personal damage for the second storm. So I want to confirm with him before I give you any sort of deadlines.
Thank you. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I guess just a follow-up comment on that. I don't remember the specific dates either, but I believe there are different dates for FEMA and for SBA, and both offer assistance, and some of them were extended, dates were extended, and others were closed and then reopened. So more information about all of that would be helpful.
I'll look, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Shoresman, to get a schedule out, what the rolling dates are, because it did get confusing. There was an email that came out in the middle of the storms that said some dates have been extended and some expired. So we'll get some clarity on that.
Thank you. Any other questions for the City Manager report? Okay. Now we'll move forward to public comment. This is for public comment on items not on the agenda. So if you have something you'd like to share, this is that time to give a yellow slip of paper to the city clerk. And city clerk, who do we have?
Okay, we have 3 so far. Ann Hodges, Biz Steinberg, and then Gary Clements.
Hello, I'm here tonight to talk about details. You guys are driving me absolutely nuts. My kids are tired of hearing about it. And it's things from on Choro Street. I know, bad subject, but you have trash can space. Trash cans, when you line them up, are 9 feet. But the trash company asks you to put 3 feet between the cans so the machines can take, the trucks can pick them up and put them down properly. Your space is only 10 feet. You're 5 feet short. I mean, I don't know, maybe the person who was drawing it up doesn't take out trash. They may not live in town. They may not even consider what the consequences are of living in a space after they design it. People need to be able to live in your spaces and have functional cities. You took 11 projects you took money out of. What detail are they going to miss out of those? Is it going to be a bench? Maybe a shortened walkway? Are we not going to get trash cans, trees? I mean, I'd be really, really ticked off if I was one of those 11 projects saying, oh, it's now going to Charles Street. You guys out at the airport don't get your money. How are you going to refund these projects other than shorting them? And this is a detail that people have been promised. You have another project coming up, and everybody's starting to call it the Prado Bridge. It's not a Prado Bridge. It is a Prado overpass. The city has been collecting money from agencies, subdividers, all over for over 20 years. We're gonna get a bridge. and it's going to hook up to Broad Street on the Prado extension. We even had an election about it. You can't call it if you're not going to give us off-ramps, you're lying to the people who have been here in town for 20 years. I know a lot of people haven't been, but we have been looking forward to an overpass at Prado, not a bridge. And, saying, well, we'll get the overpass, we'll get the on-ramps later. If they're not planned in now, what makes you think you're going to have more room later? If you don't do the project as a whole, you guys aren't going to finish it because we see it all over town. How long did it take them to put a light on Choro under the freeway? That freeway's been there at least 50 years. And that's what I think Prado's turning into too, because you're not taking care of the details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. I'm Biz Steinberg from Community Action Partnership. And tonight I'm here representing the Board of Directors of CapsFlow, the staff, volunteers, and everybody we serve. We all want to thank Mayor Stewart for her time that she has served on the board of CapsFlow, first as a city councilwoman and also as mayor. I'm not sure all of you are aware, but the city of San Luis Obispo in our bylaws always has a seat. Jan Marks has been in that chair before as well. And we've welcomed Emily Francis to take over Mayor Stewart's seat. So we want to thank you for all the direct service you've provided, the breakfast you bring to the homeless at 40 Prado on the weekends, your advocacy on our energy conservation, helping include our energy director as a facilitator on the climate change discussions, your advocacy on child care and looking at the ordinances in the city, which then has implications in the county for child care, family child care homes to be set up, maybe where they weren't thought of before, to meet the growing need for children's programs. You ask tough questions. We have good debates, always friendly at the board of directors. And I know if Dee Lacey were here right now, she would be saying, Erica, thank you for all your reports you give at the end as each board member shares what's happening in their neck of the woods, as she puts it. So thank you for helping people, changing lives over these last few years. And I've got a little something to give you. Oh, and I stayed under 3 minutes, so.
Thank you.
I want to give you the box too. So this is just thanking you. It's the least we can do. And we know you're still not far away.
Thank you so much.
Here, I'm going to give you this. You want to do a picture?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and the staff too here. You know, we work together on a lot of projects, but it starts with our board members, our policymakers. And so, Erica, thank you so much for your time and effort. And we still know where to reach you. So
yes, you do.
Thank you. And Emily, I have a little something for you, but being your home, I'll give it to the city clerk and she'll get your new name tag to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I was looking for a eulogy or something later. Thank you so much. Next on the public comment.
Gary Clemens.
Hi.
Hi, my name is Jerry Clemens, and Bob already broached the subject that I am going to be talking about. I really, really appreciate that. Where are you? There you are. This is why I'm here, is to talk about the event that's going to be taking place on Sunday at the Marriott with the Cougar Conservancy and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And it's going to be about coexisting with wildlife. And you had some questions there about what you're supposed to do. You know, if you do see a mountain lion, it's like Bob said, stand up, spread your arms out, yell really, really, don't run. Whatever you do not run. And another thing, you know, like in your yard, when you're out on a walk, you know, out on the trail and stuff, carry an air horn with you. That really works. I'm sharing some of the best practices. I've gotten to be able to be at some trainings with Cougar Conservancy down in the LA area. We are so lucky to have them here to come do this presentation for us. And I just hope that well, number one, I hope you're able to share this on the city's social media sites, if you can do that, and talk to your neighbors and friends. And the more educated we are, you know, I can't stress it anymore. The more educated we are on how to protect ourselves, we're also protecting our wildlife. They need our help, you know, for their survival. And also, you know, for our safety as well, that they don't want to be around us any more than we want to be around them. So let's learn as many tools as we possibly can on coexisting. Okay, and I ask everybody here, please, if you don't want to go, talk to your friends, neighbors, share the information. Oh yeah, it's at the Marriott this Sunday from 2 to 4 o'clock. All right, thank you very much. If you have any questions, talk to me.
Thank you. Do we have any others? Okay. Okay. Bill, did you have a Councilmember Pease?
Thank you so much. I didn't know if staff wanted to clarify, but there was a misunderstanding about the Prado Bridge and the Prado Overpass. Do you want to, two different projects, maybe clarify that? Thank you.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Pease, there are in fact two projects, yes, the Prado Road Overpass, and then there's a bridge, but I will leave it to people who are more competent to talk about that. We have got Matt Horn.
Well, I don't know about more competent, but I'll give it a shot. So I'm going to talk about three things. Our two Prado projects and trash cans. So first, absolutely, we have two very large construction projects on Prado. One is the interchange. And the interchange is the bridge that goes over the 101 freeway and will connect Prado Road to the opposite side, Delidio, the roundabout right there. So that will have a northbound on and off ramp. It will not have a southbound on and off ramp. So it's not a complete interchange, it's a partial interchange. That does not preclude the southbound connections from happening in the future, but there are interchange spacing requirements that we have not met the design standard for. And if we wish to include those ramps in that project, it will delay it many years. So that's one project that we have. We also have the Prado Creek Bridge project, which is on Prado at Higuera. It's a widening of the bridge, very multimodal based you'll have both sidewalk, bike lane, various travel lanes, and also some intersection improvements. So that's two very large projects. So we are moving forward with the promise to the community to get Prado rebuilt, connected across the 101. And so those are underway. I believe we're planning on starting the Prado Creek Bridge project in 2024, and then the Prado Interchange in 2025. Prado Interchange build length is about 4 years. So It's a massive investment in the community, and we'll get to see that go on for many years to come. So that's kind of it on Prado. And of course, trash cans and protected bike facilities. Basically, there's a padding, there's a buffer between the bicycle facility and the vehicle facility. And that padding, that buffer area, that's the place where you put your trash cans. And so there's a place for trash cans for your home when you front a protected bike lane facility. So I think that's it. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Sorry, Matt. I think the public commenters' concerns were about the distance between trash cans. Like, I guess the recycling versus if I understood her correctly, she was more concerned about how much space you have to have between the different cans and that there wasn't enough space along the frontage of her yard. Do you have any knowledge of that?
I guess I'm not quite sure what the frontage of her yard is, but if you have 3 cans, 3 feet spacing, 3, 6, 9, so if the home is wider than 12 feet, I would imagine there should be enough frontage for it. If we're trying about fitting it in a parking space, where I think that where we might have been talking about is that it doesn't need to fit within a parking space because it's not within a parking area, it's within the padded area of the bike lane. So that's what I thought we were referring to, but I don't see her right here. So
I think it was also about the fact that you have to have so much space in between each one. So it was wider between the cans and the spaces in between than the space we're allotting on the drawing.
But
Councilmember Pease?
Right, and so, but I think because we have kind of white striped areas that are at grade on either side of a driveway, and I think Mr. Schwartz had indicated last time that would be an appropriate space for cans, but if you need more length, you could bump it up onto the curb, right? I mean, to the little built-in divider, the protected bike lane piece.
Absolutely, yeah, you could put it in the protected
Excellent.
bike lane piece. It's a very long section, longitudinal with the street. So there should be ample room for trash can spacing along the route. We do have educational material, and we will be pushing on educational material as this project gets closer to fruition. So
that'll be important. City Manager?
I think Mr. Horn has answered it amply, and I think this is going to be a learning exercise. We've learned a lot just on both Marsh and Higuera Street, and I think that neighbors in the city have figured it out, and so we'll be out there after the facility goes live to make sure we work through all these small details.
Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions from my colleagues? Councilmember Francis, thank you. All right, we'll move forward to the consent agenda. In theory, the consent agenda is items that are not controversial. And this is that time where we will go ahead and have public comment on the consent items. So if you have any public comment, please send them over to the city clerk right now. And would any of my colleagues like to pull any of the items that are on the consent agenda at this time? Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes, I don't want to pull anything, but I do want to make a comment on 6C, the annual appointments to the city advisory body. Should I do that now or later?
Let's hold off till we do the public comment.
Whenever you want.
Thank
Okay.
you. Councilmember Shorsman.
I don't want to pull any items either, but I also wanted to comment on 6C and also 6G when I have a chance.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Francis, please. Okay, great, thank you. Can we go ahead and do public comment?
There are none.
All right, no public comment. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, tonight we're considering appointing 31 people to our advisory bodies, boards. I wanted to just, first of all, thank everyone who applied. We had an incredible range of very talented and capable people who applied for these positions. Unfortunately, we were not able to appoint everyone, so there were some hard choices, but I do want to say to people who are not appointed, don't be discouraged, because these opportunities to volunteer come up every single year. The other thing I want to do is just compliment our city clerk's office and especially Kevin Christensen and Teresa Purrington for managing to fill these 31 spots. It takes a lot of work, a lot of logistics, a lot of emails. Anyway, these advisory bodies are very important to the city council and to the residents in general. That's how we get our input from the residents through the advisory bodies that report to the council. So I'm really just so happy to see how many talented people are up for appointment. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Yeah, basically ditto what Vice Mayor Marks said, but I also wanted to add that, you know, as she mentioned, we had often more people applying for positions than we had spaces to accommodate, which is an amazing thing to experience in a community like this where people want to be involved so much. So appreciative of that, but we do still have some vacancies for a few things. A few of our advisory bodies still have openings, so if you have interest, either check with our city clerk staff or on our website, and let's fill all those vacancies. Then I had one comment about 6G, and I just wanted to say that I had an exchange with staff regarding the Federal Transit Title VI program update. It's an every 3-year process. From my understanding, staff have done a lot of work to get us to the point here where we have a product that we can submit. This project will come around again in 3 years. Well, they will do another update. And my discussion with staff was around hoping that we can make the most of opportunities to engage individuals that might not otherwise have historically participated in this, specifically our DEI manager, and just trying to get as much input from people who maybe would like to use our transit system but haven't been able to, had various barriers. And so as much as we can expand the outreach on that in 3 years, that was what I was looking for. So I just wanted to bring that up so people knew that that was on my mind.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. If there were no other comments, I was going to move the consent agenda, but I did want to also note that there was an agenda correspondence clarifying the language about the community service officers. So I just want to include that in the resolution.
Thank you. There was also agenda correspondence regarding additional people on the personnel board for the advisory bodies too.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, City Attorney, for that update on the CSO. That was very helpful. Is there a second?
I'd like to second it.
Vice Mayor Marks.
Second.
Great. If no other comments, Councilmember Pease? No? Okay. Can we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0, and I also want to echo my thanks for everyone who applied for the advisory body boards and are actually going to serve on the advisory boards. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate your time and your energy. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll see you back at 6:40. Well, welcome back, everybody. Thanks for a little break. Now we move into our public hearing and business items. And Michael Codron, you're here to chat with us about flexible density.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. We're happy to be here tonight to present to you a recommendation from the Planning Commission on the Downtown Flexible Density Program. And Kyle Bell, our housing coordinator, will be leading the presentation, and he is supported by Ryan Tomlinson, who is an intern with the Community Development Department, who has done a lot of work on this project. And one thing I just want to highlight about flexible density is it's a targeted program for downtown to help us deliver an additional 500 units over, what we had planned in the current general plan build out horizon, and it's a fairly targeted and focused effort to accomplish that, and really to accomplish reintroducing the concept of downtown as a neighborhood, and hopefully with a more 24/7 presence with some of the hotel units that we're seeing downtown, some of the development projects that have been entitled are moving forward, and now with flexible density, the potential for a larger increment of new residents living in our core. We can also support downtown vitality by enabling a range of other types of uses that we would like to see down there. As the community development director, there was a hardware store when I first started working downtown, a photo studio, a variety of things that, we used to have to cater more to neighbors of downtown and people who could walk into downtown. And people ask me, when's downtown getting a grocery store and things like that? And it's a chicken or egg question. I think it's gonna take more people downtown in order to accomplish that. And this is a start. So this is a pilot program. We have a cap of 500 units, but certainly we plan to monitor how it does and come back to the city council about halfway through that period to gauge its success and see what the next steps are with the city council. So. Just a brief introduction, but we have a detailed report for you and presentation. So Kyle will go ahead and take the lead. Thank you.
Give me one moment to share my screen here. Okay, good evening. My name is Kyle Bell, Housing Coordinator for the Community Development Department. Tonight, we will be introducing the Downtown Flexible Density Program that is intended to implement Housing Element Program 2.15 and Housing Element Policy 6.6. The concept of flexible density was included in several discussions over the last 9 years, starting with the adoption of the 2014 land use element, which was directed by city staff to consider alternatives to standard density practices downtown. The program was also discussed in 2017 under the Downtown Concept Plan. And then under the 2018 zoning regulations update, the program consultant provided a flexible density white paper that discussed the potential of such a program within the city. In 2020, both the Housing Element Update and the Climate Action Plan Update specifically identified the flexible density program to achieve community objectives related to housing production and climate action goals. The Flexible Density Program was also specifically identified as a program under the 2021 to 2023 Major City Goal for Housing and Homelessness. Before we jump into discussion about the Flexible Density Program, it is important to note that this program that is proposed is only one tool that the city utilizes to achieve housing objectives throughout the community. The program is intended to work in concert with other housing initiatives such as fractional density, reduced impact fees for smaller units, streamlined review procedures for housing projects, and is intended to complement the recent changes to the inclusionary housing regulations. Housing Element Program 2.15 directs the city to evaluate a flexible density pilot program and initiate an update to the zoning regulations and community design guidelines to incorporate flexible density development options in the downtown core and portions of Upper Monterey and Mid-Higuera special focus areas to support the production of 50 smaller residential units between 150 and 600 square feet per year during the planning period. Policy 6.6 is a very similar language as this. Based on the housing element policies and programs, a draft of the program has been prepared, which includes the following key features. It reduces the density limits for units that are less than 600 square feet in size. It prohibits residential uses on the ground floor to address the development in the flood zone and preserves the commercial character of downtown. It reduces minimum parking requirements for qualifying units in the CR zone to match the existing provisions of the CD zone. It exempts qualifying units from inclusionary housing requirements as an incentive for the program. It provides developers the option to use flexible density program or density bonus projects to increase residential capacities, but not both. The program is designed to expire on January 1st, 2029, or until 500 new residential units are either entitled or permitted, or whichever occurs first. No changes are proposed to any development review process, no changes to any development standards other than density, and we also wanted to clarify that no vacation rentals will be allowed within any of these units to be part of the project, which is consistent with prohibition on vacation rentals throughout the city. So what does this all mean? In order to better describe the key components of the program, we will need to consider an example project. As identified in the council report, we will use a 10,000 square foot property as our example site. Based on the existing development standards, such as lot coverage, floor area ratio, and building height, we can identify a maximum build out of the site for about 30,000 square feet for a building area. Please note the program does not include any changes to these development standards aside from density. So let's take a moment to talk about density in the city of SLO. Since 1977, the city has utilized a program more recently referred to as the fractional density threshold, which allows for reduced density allocations for smaller units and increased density thresholds for larger units. Under existing density standards, a one-bedroom unit less than 600 square feet is equal to 0.5 density units, whereas a standard two-bedroom unit is equal to 1 density unit. Under the example project we mentioned earlier, only 8 two-bedroom units would be allowed on the property, or up to 16 one-bedroom or studio units that are less than 600 square feet. The flexible density program would reduce the density threshold for qualifying one-bedroom and studio units that are less than 600 square feet to 0.0 density units within the downtown core. All other unit types would be subject to standard fractional density thresholds. So how many units can be built is the next question. Without density, the number of units under the program would be subject to the number of units you could fit within the limitations of other development standards applicable to the site. For example, floor area ratio is a tool that we use to regulate the intensity of development through a combination of height and lot coverage standards. The floor area ratio for the downtown core is 3.0, meaning that the maximum building area of our example site is 30,000 square feet, which is 3 times the 10,000 square foot lot. Since residential uses are prohibited on the ground floor, we can assume that the first 10,000 square feet on the ground floor would be reserved for commercial uses for the sake of simplicity, leaving about 20,000 square feet available for residential uses on the upper floors. Under the flexible density program, approximately 36 units could fit within that remaining 20,000 square feet, although this calculation does not account for building code requirements such as access, hallways, or other residential amenity areas such as shared laundry or other lobby area. But we're going to just say 36 for the sake of simplicity again. One of the most prominent concerns that has been expressed about this program is parking. To provide some clarification, the proposed parking reduction under the program would only be applicable to properties zoned CR within the downtown core. In 1981, parking requirements were reduced in the CD zone to half that required elsewhere in the city. And then in 1987, the city adopted the parking in lieu fee district that overlapped a portion of our downtown core. The program does not introduce any changes to the existing parking requirements in the CD zone, and only extends the provision equally throughout the downtown core for qualifying units under the program in the CR zone. As identified in the recently adopted Access and Parking Management Plan, there are over 2,600 public parking spaces throughout the downtown area, and the existing downtown residential overnight parking program is currently underutilized. which will remain available for any newly created residential units as part of this program. The map on the screen shows all of the public parking lots and structures as purple, and all the street parking as red, and the green areas are all the existing private parking lots. So what is changing regarding parking? Residential parking requirements in the city are based on the number of bedrooms per unit. In summary, the minimum parking requirement for projects in the CR zone is essentially 1 space per unit, plus guest parking. As mentioned earlier, the residential parking requirements in the CD zone is half that which is required elsewhere in the city. So the minimum parking requirement in the CD zone is essentially 1 space for every 2 units plus guest parking. Under the flexible density program, parking requirements for the qualifying units would be reduced in the CR zone to match the current requirements of the CD zone. On February 22nd, the ordinance was reviewed by the Planning Commission, which unanimously recommended council to adopt the program. However, the Planning Commission recommended that staff explore options to reduce or eliminate parking requirements for qualifying units under the program. As outlined in the agenda report, staff is not recommending any further reductions under the program, as reducing parking requirements for properties within the parking and Luffy district would increase demand on existing parking facilities and result in deficiencies of funding for new parking facilities and maintenance of existing facilities. I'm gonna take a little water break. All right, so however, there are other options available under existing zoning regulations that allow for parking reductions. Any project under the program could apply for an additional parking reduction to further reduce the amount of on-site parking. Parking reductions greater than 10% require approval by the Planning Commission. A parking demand study is required as evidence to substantiate any parking reduction request, intended to ensure the supply of on-street parking and reduce impacts to the surrounding neighborhood. A vehicle trip reduction plan may also be required to reduce parking demand on the site by providing amenities to residents and promote or increase accessibility to other active transportation options. According to the Public Engagement and Noticing Manual, the process for the ordinance adoption would typically fall under the inform, consult options because the program is specifically identified in the housing element as a program, and the council's major city goal was to bring the program to review within this fiscal plan. However, the public engagement approach for this program followed the consult/collaborate approach due to the sensitivity of downtown and the interest of housing needs in the community. The public engagement consisted of consultations with various city departments and divisions. Open City Hall community forum was provided where we had 304 survey responses. We provided a city news release and provided interviews for the New Times, Tribune, and several other news outlets. We held stakeholder group interviews with 15 different interest groups, and we provided a focused roundtable discussion for input on the program. And we also provided community presentations were provided to the Downtown Association Board of Directors, the Chamber of Commerce, the Regional Housing Action Team, and the Developers Roundtable. Pursuant to CEQA guidelines, an addendum was prepared to ensure consistency with the environmental determination of the 2018 zoning regulations update for implementation of the Downtown Flexible Density Program. The addendum concluded that the program, as proposed, did not result in any new or more severe environmental impacts and is consistent with the scope of the previously approved 2018 zoning regulations update. And this actually concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you. That was concise and in-depth, and I really appreciate the illustration. I don't know if City Manager shared, but I very much appreciate kind of visualizing that. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you very much. Wonderful presentation. I really appreciated it, and was glad to hear that there's a plan to monitor the project and return to council at a midway point. And so my question was, what metrics are we going to be following? What does success look like? Are we going to go in with established metrics or goals that we're going to be looking for in that return review that comes to council?
And speak more to that, but I believe what we were looking at is that a 250 unit threshold at either entitlement or issuance was the the point in time at which we would want to return to City Council or Planning Commission for additional input. But I'll leave it to Michael.
All right, thank you, Kyle. And Mayor Stewart, Councilmember Francis, we're going to evaluate it as we go. You know, we have a lot of experience developing housing across the community. What we're looking for here is an additional increment, right? We're trying to spur production for the major city goal of housing within our downtown core. So as Kyle mentioned, this follows a lot of work beginning with the 2014 general plan land use element to conceptualize and focus on additional housing downtown. But there's been a continuum of input and direction guiding us towards this outcome, towards this recommendation. Maybe one of the most recent is the Future Forum and the work that we did during the pandemic to understand what the changing retail of downtown is. And so I don't have a list of specific metrics today that we're going to use to evaluate the program, but we do have a lot of guidance in our existing documents. And I can imagine that when we come back to the City Council with the experience of having entitled 200 plus units, that we'll be able to talk about what the increased population is downtown, what the future plans are. We have a lot of other projects entitled for construction downtown, over 300 other housing units that are right now entitled in some form of progress towards development, as well as hotel rooms. And so I imagine that what it's going to be is a report on downtown and assessing where we've been, what this program has accomplished in terms of, reintroducing these neighborhood concepts into the downtown core, and then where we're headed.
I really, oh, sorry.
I think City Manager wanted to add to that too, Councilmember.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Francis. I could imagine there'd be a couple other, probably more objective. I think those are really good metrics, but what are the total number of units? What is the affordability? What are the rents at? What is the mix of rental versus ownership? Are we seeing any sort of aberrations in the policy? Are we seeing things being converted for homestays, short-term rentals? I think we're going to learn. And so that's this midpoint is a way for us to come back and report to council. You'll have other waypoints as well. Michael tomorrow night is going to be bringing the general plan annual report to the Planning Commission, and so I could imagine that we'll be reporting on the efficacy of the program as well. But tonight, if there's any metrics that the council says, this is something from my perspective, from my vantage point, that we ought to be monitoring for us at the get-go to understand that, then we can build that into our intake process.
Please, yeah, that would be great. I appreciate the follow-up from all three of you on that. And I really liked that characterization of downtown as a neighborhood and that downtown vitality. So I guess one of the metrics that I would be most interested in following up with is, in addition to affordability and a few of the other things you mentioned, is owner occupancy, or conversely, when we're talking about rentals, just vacancy in general. Because if we're really looking to get people in the downtown core and living down there and kind of bringing back that image of a real neighborhood, I think one of the fears I've heard expressed from folks is that we end up with these units that then end up somehow vacant or only occasionally visited, and that doesn't really contribute to the feeling that we're looking for downtown. So I'd love to see that as one of the metrics that we're looking at. I had a question on that expiration. Is it okay if I continue with my question?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I'm assuming that the expiration is due to the fact that this is intended to be a pilot program. So I'm wondering if when we reach the expiration point, will it return to the council and say the program is just really doing exactly what we want? Will there be an opportunity to then continue the program or revise it to get, maybe more focused around particular goals in the downtown area?
Yes, I can answer that question. So We picked the expiration date of January 1st, 2029, because that will be directly after our next housing element update. And so we actually envision that a large chunk of the work as part of the housing element update will include our analysis and recommendations on this program. So we'd likely see some follow-up immediately after the housing element update regarding this program.
Thank you for that clarification. I'll hold the rest of my questions and let my colleagues ask theirs.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. I think the main question that I have, and Director Codron and I had a little bit of a conversation about this, in terms of having this focus on studio and one-bedroom units, which is great. I think it's a real need. But we are seeing some trends in urban environment to have more alternative housing types, some kinds of co-living, micro units, et cetera. And especially in a retrofit type of situation, there's the cost of bathrooms and kitchens is very expensive, right? Because we're having to run the utilities to them. And so it seems like there might be a model where you would have you might be renting a room and then have a shared bathroom facilities and kitchen. And so I'm interested in, I'm wondering if there's some way that this could accommodate that type of situation within a flexible density kind of situation, because those units are meeting the goals, but if it's called, if you had 4 rooms and a shared bathroom and a kitchen, that's a 4-bedroom apartment. That's 2 density units, and you wouldn't be able to, in our example, I think you'd only be able to do 4 of them, right? So it's, so you'd be able to get like, I don't have all the examples, but 30 of these little ones or kind of only 4 of these big ones. And so I guess I'm wondering, is there some way that with director review and approval, so we're not having to like do everything, but if there's an intent to do a micro living rental situation that could fit in with a kind of this invisible density unit that we're giving to the units less than 600 square feet, is that, were you able to consider something like that or talk about that kind of flexibility in the program for a co-living type of situation? Like the establishment, yes.
Yes, we actually did talk about this, and we actually talked about this more in depth during the 2018 zoning regulations update. And so during the 2018 zoning regulation update, when we were evaluating implementing Senate Bill 317 regarding efficiency units, a lot of language about efficiency units were about shared living facilities. And so what we did was we improved the zoning regulations to make group housing options more accessible. So in the downtown core, all you would need is a minor use permit to establish a group housing project. So that's currently allowed and has been allowed since 2018. And so that would allow you to have, say, 10-bedroom residence with shared living facilities, such as 1 kitchen, and you could have, and that would only be 2 density units for all 10 of those bedrooms. And so if you had, say, our example project allows you to have 8 density units, and so you'd be able to have 4 group housing units on the property, and it would just have, say, 10 bedrooms each, shared kitchens. Does that make sense? Am I explaining that sufficiently?
Thank you. That is super helpful. So we have a designation for group housing with a minor use permit that can be up to 10 sleeping units, but you would only get 2 density units from that. So yes,
sorry, I used 10 as an example. So there isn't really a limit to the number of bedrooms, so long as you meet other development standards such as parking and other things.
Okay, great. And so if those aren't efficiency units though, right? Because an efficiency unit actually does require its own bathroom by building code, right? So this is a different model as already defined, and so could be utilized in this flexible density program. But I mean, it could be built downtown. It wouldn't have anything to do with the flexible density in this case, right? We wouldn't need it, in other words.
Correct. There would be other opportunities to provide for group housing that wouldn't necessarily need the provisions of flexible density. There is building code requirements around efficiency units, about the limitations of minimum size. The state law wasn't specific about shared living facilities or independent living facilities when they defined the law, so we didn't either. So we made sure that you could provide for an either-or scenario. So when we look at efficiency units, we do consider those to be inclusive of group housing projects. Or not. It can be either or.
And just one bit of information that I wanted to add is that you could also combine within a project. You could have group housing units on a floor, and
Right.
you could have
And then tuck in
2 and
some-
3 bedroom units, and you can have flexible density units. So our code isn't limiting in that aspect.
Great, thank you. That was my only one.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorsman.
Thank you. Thanks for the great presentation. I also watched the Planning Commission meeting, and I have to say, Kyle, since after being on the Planning Commission and now sitting here, I always appreciate how you break all this stuff down, because for someone who hasn't been a planner before, it gets very detailed and in the weeds very quickly, and my brain starts trying to do the calculations in my head, and you always explain it very well. So I appreciated the examples that you gave in the agenda correspondence as well, especially the one that took into account the floor area density of the commercial space and how you would mix inclusionary housing units in with the flexible density units. It just, it made it much clearer for me. Curious about rules that we might have. We had some questions about, how can we assure that these units are either built by or lived in by local residents, or both? What kind of, do we have any ability to do some sort of local preference in either the building or the ownership or rental or both?
This is a new system. Yes, I got distracted with the mic.
Do you remember my question?
I froze up. Remind me again, I'm so sorry.
That's okay, it was confusing with the mics. Local preference for both people who might be owning or renting these units, but also, can we put in place any stipulations about local preference in the building?
Yes, we went through this conversation a lot with the San Luis Ranch and Avila Ranch projects. I believe our attorney's office has a lot to say on the subject, but essentially the individual developer would need to suggest that as part of their program. Requiring it from a city perspective does have some implications with the Fair Housing Act. And so we didn't have any provisions under the flexible density program due to that hesitancy. But if the attorney's office would like to speak more to that,
And maybe I can ask Michael Cadre. I know we got feedback during our housing element about some of these pieces. I don't know if that's germane to the discussion, but I know that came up.
Yes, so thank you, Kyle, for those responses. I think that the issue of owner occupancy, there's two things to keep in mind. One is that we expect there to be relatively few subdivisions as part of flexible density developments, where we don't have a lot of ownership opportunities downtown, certainly not as you get above like a 2-story building. The only ownership opportunities that I know are like townhomes, where you own the ground up to the roof deck in the case of our downtown situation, or 2 stories. And so it gets much more complicated to do like high-rise or 3-story, 4-story, 5-story subdivisions. So we're expecting fewer of those. So that's one thing. The other is that if we do have subdivisions, owners have the ability normally to rent. But if you did and you had an owner occupancy requirement, our experience has been that is something that has been proposed by the developer or negotiated during a development agreement sort of contract. And as City Manager Johnson referenced, we did attempt to have a policy in our housing element that spoke directly to this. And HCD asked us to modify the language and roll it back. State Department of Housing Community Development, who certifies the city's housing element, that is actually considered somewhat of an exclusionary policy to apply broad base. But at the same time, if it's, we've seen success with it in the Sarah Meadows neighborhood and in other neighborhoods where voluntarily a developer has imposed that requirement, and it gives a new neighborhood a good, sort of a running start in terms of people who have a longer tenure. But now, it's past the initial period, and so there are some homes out there that are being rented, but the neighborhood has been established. And so I think it's a fine thing, but I wouldn't necessarily want to have it everywhere. And I think we're open to those proposals from developers, but don't see a pathway to having that be a formal requirement or policy of the city.
So it would have to be something that's brought by the developer to whatever they're planning to build that might happen to include these flexible density units in it, rather than something that we would request or ask or require them to do.
We might request and ask for it if that was the type of situation we were in. So if it was a development agreement, or if it was a project where there were a lot of concessions or things being asked for in terms of building height or other things that a developer wanted to make a project work, that could be one of our asks.
Okay. My other question was around the homestay. Thank you again for answering that question in the agenda correspondence, but I was still a little bit confused as to how, as I think your agenda correspondence said, a unit that's 600 square feet, most likely going to be mostly rental units. Hard to have a homestay in a 600 square foot, one bedroom apartment, so to speak. But if it was a condominium, I think there was some language around if it was a condominium, an owner-occupied condominium, that might be more possible. So just trying to understand that a little bit better.
Just a little background on the city's homestay program. So we don't allow short-term rentals in the city. Vacation rentals are illegal throughout the city. It doesn't matter what the zone is. You can't do a vacation rental, a short-term rental. You can only have a hotel. And people have gotten creative about what qualifies as a hotel. So we have some smaller hotels in the city. And you can also have a homestay. A homestay requires owner occupancy. So you cannot either rent a room as a vacation rental, or the whole unit, the whole house, unless the unit is owner occupied. And for the city's part, we confer with the county as to who's receiving the homeowner's exemption. And if you're not receiving the homeowner's exemption for that property, you won't qualify for a homestay. So it would, in this situation, in terms of flexible density, it would have to be a subdivided property. So it'd have to be like a condominium or planned unit development type of project. It would have to be, the unit would have to be owner occupied, meaning they'd have to be taking that homeowner's exemption, and then they could do the unit rental under our program, which there's a lot of requirements with our program in terms of being accessible. So if there's complaints, having a plan and telephone numbers where people can communicate with you, you're expected to have somebody that's managing that, or yourself close by.
Okay, I think there's obviously concern, and I think it was a little bit behind the scenes in Councilmember Francis's comments about wanting to make sure that these are occupied by full-time, as much as we can, residents, rather than being converted into vacation homes or homestays or that sort of thing. So
I think we have that
metrics.
Concern throughout the city of SLO,
Yeah,
and that's why we
agreed.
have the regulatory structure we do.
Agreed. And also appreciate the suggestions that she made for metrics. Those were some of the ones that I had on my mind too, as well as I think she mentioned, or one of you mentioned, price and affordability of the units. That would be a big concern for me too. We know the housing prices here are high, so wanting to track that would be important. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Marks.
My mic off. Oh, thanks. Okay. Yeah, I had a question. Has to do with an older kind of model in the downtown, like with the Hans Gallery, where you have the gallery down below and then above you have all these various living units that's been there since the building was built. So my question is whether you could add a second or third story to current one-story buildings, like, for instance, Charles Shoes or the old Ross building, or like that. Is this the kind of thing that, assuming that the underlying building was structurally sound enough to bear the weight and all that, could you have that kind of housing built on top of existing one-story commercial buildings with this plan?
Yes, the plan would accommodate that. Again, as long as the buildings are structurally sound for additional floors, but adding additional floors to existing one-story buildings would also be subject to a lot of design review for our community design guidelines, as well as development standards associated with downtown. So we'd see some offset with upper story setbacks and things like that to preserve our commercial street frontage experience. But yes, it could accommodate that.
Yeah, so that's my other question. Would these units have to be, would they have to go through like the normal ARC, CHC, that kind of, because there are a lot of historical buildings down in the downtown?
Yes, all these projects would be subject to the architectural review process and the Cultural Heritage Resource Committee for ensuring compliance with our historic preservation guidelines, our community design guidelines, and the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic resources.
Another question has to do with the ratio of these proposed small units. It could, theoretically, could someone say, propose a high-rise up to 75 feet full of these small units? Or is there a wish to, in some ways, scatter them throughout the downtown? Or would there be any kind of constraint on the concentration of these tiny units in terms of the downtown? Or is that part of the plan, or is that? I don't know.
Well, certainly it's very hard to predict what projects are going to be submitted ahead of time, but so the downtown height limit is 50 feet, and if you go above 50 feet, there are additional standards that you have to address, one of which is required for any building over 50 feet in the downtown core is to require affordable housing. So I believe there's a ratio that at least 10% of the project would require affordable housing as that component. So either 50 to 60 feet requires that, as well as 50 feet to 75 feet. But yes, those projects could be subject to the flexible density program and could use some of the units that are available under the limit cap. As for the program's design, the program is designed to accommodate units throughout the downtown core, or there could be more projects allocated in some areas versus others, depending on what's available, what land is available for redevelopment. So it's hard to predict which way it will go.
So within what's being proposed, there's no particular constraint about the ratio of how many of these would be built altogether. Is that correct?
Correct. So the program can accommodate retrofitting existing office space and converting that to residential units under the flexible density program. It can accommodate additional stories added to one-story buildings. It can accommodate new ground-up construction. So anywhere in between, subject to all the standards I mentioned earlier. So it's again, we designed it in a way to be flexible to provide for a multitude of development types.
Thanks. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you. I have a few questions, and I'll get back to you, Councilmember Francis. Thank you, Councilmember Francis, for asking about the metrics, and City Manager, I also appreciated kind of that expansion, because that was part of my question as well, is how in this attempt to have more housing, I think we are trying to have more affordable housing, and this could maybe by design equal that. So it would be unfortunate to have like a $1.1 million, 600 square foot housing unit. Could you go back to the public engagement slide? Thank you so much. So the developers roundtable, I'm just wondering, was there input from them as far as, yes, this sounds great, we can't wait to build these, or what was the input you received?
Due to the scheduling of the roundtable discussion for the developers roundtable, we had to push it out after Planning Commission. But we did let them know that the program was coming around to Planning Commission, and they did participate in a lot of the other opportunities for public input. And so by the time we actually presented to the developers roundtable, they were receptive and they were encouraged. And the feedback we got from them was I think it's identified in our public engagement summary, but I believe they were looking for reduced parking requirements, and they had a few light questions as well, but that was pretty much it.
Okay, just wondered if there was like enthusiasm, because I remember when we were looking at 1144 Choro, we talked about like the San Francisco and Silicon Valley model, that people do want kind of what Councilmember Pease described, kind of some sort of mini housing with shared bathrooms, et cetera, or what you've been describing in the presentation today. But then I haven't heard anything kind of since that, and I've heard they've not been as excited. So, and then People Self-Help Housing, or HASLO, I'm just wondering, in all of these discussions we've been having around affordable housing, whether it was this specific one or not, has there been any response from them as far as their ideas on the flexible density and what that looks like?
Yes, during the stakeholder focus group that we held with, I believe HASLO, Peoples, and TIMA were all present in the same meeting, as well as Cal Poly. So we got feedback from all of them together, and they were all trying to encourage us to promote affordable housing as much as we can. So I don't think they were in favor of the inclusionary housing exemption under the program, but I believe they did understand the intention and the direction from council originally when this came during the inclusionary housing update.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I think most of my other questions have been answered. Councilmember Francis?
Yeah, thank you. It was a great segue. So I was hoping, I know that this is covered in our packet, but I was hoping that maybe we could have a discussion of the thought process behind exempting these housing units from the inclusionary process. I think that's really important that we're clear in what the goal is of this project versus other types of housing projects.
I can address that, Kyle.
Thank you.
All right. So Mayor Stewart and Councilmember Francis, the discussion about inclusionary housing and the inclusionary housing ordinance update, big part of that was around our affordable by design criteria, affectionately referred to as Table 2A. And so what the request was of the City Council was to keep, there's a few bits of feedback. One was to keep into account for promoting affordable by design type developments. And in the case of, and so we're going to continue to implement that direction from the City Council, looking to, exempt project types from affordable housing that are producing projects that otherwise would have qualified for those reductions under Table 2A. But also we're doing other things in terms of evaluating other ways to bring financing and money into our local ecosystem to help support and fund affordable housing, not just built by developers, but that where the city can contribute and pull the string instead of trying to push the string of affordable housing. But in the case of, why would flexible density units be exempt? It's largely because if you do the math on flexible density units under Table 2A, they would not generate an affordable housing requirement. So we tried to keep that, the objective of Table 2A and affordable by design concepts intact in our proposal for flexible density. And so that's really what generated it and where it came from. At the same time, as Kyle was able to share in the agenda correspondence today, the projects as a whole are not exempt from affordable housing requirements. So if there are units that are subject to regular density requirements, so they're over 600 square feet, those will trigger an inclusionary housing requirement, and the commercial development will have a responsibility to pay a commercial linkage fee for affordable housing. And so those are parts of the inclusionary housing update that the council adopted. So these are really hybrid projects in that sense. And ultimately, you can reduce the total percentage of affordable housing required in a project by building a lot of flexible density units and essentially achieve a very similar outcome as to what Affordable by Design or Table 2A used to deliver.
Thank you for that important context. And just to circle back around for a moment to the conversation that I think myself and Councilmember Shoresman were getting into with the kind of issues around owner occupancy and local requirements. And obviously there's a lot of issues there that make that really challenging. I was curious about the idea of vacancy rules, and I know you sort of alluded to it, but what are on the front end? I know that vacancy taxes are something that has to go to the voters, but on the front end of things, are there things that we can do to encourage the units to actually be occupied?
Well, one of the things I know is that standing inventory or vacant units is something that developers work extremely hard to avoid. And so I don't think that the goal of any developer building a project is to have units that won't be taken up by the community. So just the analysis that's done in advance in terms of what the demand is and how the rents or sale prices are set, or and how that project is underwritten. The expectation is 80% occupancy, and that's typically how projects are financed. And you never finance something on 100%, but 80% is pretty good. And so I think that we'll take feedback from the city council in terms of any provisions that you think would be helpful as it relates to homestays. Like if the council just doesn't want to allow homestays in flexible density units, for example, that's something that we would have time to implement before any flexible density units are constructed. And there may be other policy objectives that the city council would like to achieve where we could take direction and go work on that problem. But the time frame that's in front of us right now in terms of flexible density development is still 18 to 24 months, even if somebody, tomorrow submitted an application.
Yeah, apologies. I should have been more clear on the front end of that. I wasn't meaning that they would build them and then not sell them. I was just meaning more in terms of the second home ownership that we talked about earlier, and then having no vibrancy in the downtown as a result. But that's maybe a follow-up discussion around what policy provisions we might consider in order to encourage folks actually living in the units they end up purchasing or renting. But thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Shoresman.
Thank you. I did come up with one last question. I think I attempted to ask this beforehand, and I think I got my terminology confused. There's a lot of different terminology around density bonus law and inclusionary housing and flexible density, and how do all these things interact with each other, and when can you use what? And so, now as I've come to understand, based on your great examples in the agenda correspondence, how inclusionary housing ordinance and flexible density can maybe work side by side or hand in hand with each other. But can you talk a little bit more about density bonus law and why that does not necessarily work, if I understood correctly, in combination with flexible density?
Yes, so flexible density, I actually have a backup slide for what we had in the report. Here it is. So this is language right out of the report. So the density bonus law and the flexible density program, both are intended to provide for similar objectives to increase residential capacity. However, they don't work that well together. So for instance, under density bonus law, you have to kind of designate density units to the project in order to calculate how many units you can have versus how many units that need to be dedicated as affordable. So when we change the metric to 0.0 density units for a flexible unit, that actually conflicts with density bonus law. And so we wouldn't actually be able to do the calculations under density bonus law with those metrics. Furthermore, the intentions are very similar in that pursuing a density bonus law project, you have to dedicate a certain number of units as affordable, and you still get the same benefits of increasing density on the project, so you can ask for a 50% density bonus or even 100% density bonus and still designate a portion of the units as affordable and meet the same objectives that the flexible density program is presenting. So there are two paths that offer potentially the same outcome, but with different objectives and different requirements.
So you just wouldn't try to do both because they meet similar objectives, I think is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, so I can't think of a scenario where the density bonus law provides you a better option than the flexible density program. So I might be able to, correct. Exactly. So if you wanted to have more 2-bedroom units as part of your project, you could use density bonus law for increasing the number of 2-bedroom units you could provide on the property. But with flexible density units, since there is no base density, or say if I can provide, 30 or 50 small units that are less than 300 square feet, I can't use that as a multiplier for identifying how many need to be dedicated as affordable.
Because they're zero.
Because they're zero.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we're going to move forward to public comment. And City Clerk, can you please call the first person?
Yes, the first person is Barry Price, then Donna Hare Price, and then Cameron Valentine.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. It's good to see you this evening. I support increased density downtown. The objective of the flexible density program, as I understand, is to provide a housing option for those just above the very low and moderate income levels, ostensibly for young professionals making a decent living, but still not enough to afford housing in the city, which is largely beyond the range of even many workers earning living wages. As currently designed, I don't believe the program will achieve those goals. Even staff are now acknowledging that they expect most of these units to end up as rentals, and what that means is that they're going to be bought up and bid up by corporate entities and wealthy out-of-towners looking for investment property, and costs will rapidly escalate beyond the affordable range of the target group. The Council's legislative platform calls for increased funding for affordable housing and opposes the erosion of local inclusionary housing and in-lieu fee programs, yet the current ordinance does just that. It eliminates those very programs we claim to support, and it just seems entirely counterproductive to gut the very rules you implemented to increase the supply of affordable housing when even staff acknowledges that it probably won't work. Even young professionals earning a decent living can't afford a 600 square foot apartment that goes for $1 million plus and rents for $2,500 a month. And that's the price point these units will end up commanding if it's left strictly to the market. I therefore encourage the council to amend the current draft ordinance to restore the inclusionary housing requirements for all units built under the program, Also, other municipalities have found ways to use deed restrictions and similar measures to ensure that these properties are only sold or transferred to individuals and not corporate entities, and to ensure local owner occupancy requirements. I think we can do the same. Also, for all projects authorized under the flexible density plan, please include local area standards for the skilled crafts workforce that takes into account local wage rates and has robust local hire and apprenticeship training provisions. And I believe that we can find the regulatory language that would pass legal muster in all of these areas. We won't have the vibrant downtown we all want if people who own those units don't actually live there full time. If we really want what we claim, that people who work locally should live locally, then we have to make these homes available to local professionals and other workers at rates they can afford. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you.
Donna Hare Price, San Luis Obispo. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. First, I want to talk about the Anderson Hotel. The thought, innovation, and courage you all demonstrated with the Anderson Hotel was remarkable and appreciated. Thank you. That is an example of keeping our downtown vibrant. When we knocked on hundreds of doors to talk to voters a few months ago, doctors, business owners, and residents begged for affordable housing for essential workers, nurses, staff, and teachers, and we're in favor of downtown density. Living and working here is key to economic vitality and our viability. Not one person asked for at-rate market housing. Your staff report states, as proposed, the Downtown Flexible Density Program allows for ownership units to be created, but is expecting the vast majority of units to be rentals. Building more rentals for the wealthy and corporate landlord is not fixing our housing needs. Staff also notes the flexible density program is intended to accomplish this by allowing more residential density without increasing affordable housing requirements. I understand incentivizing smaller units by removing the inclusionary housing fee was your goal, but removing fees that will benefit those who we need to live here is short-sighted and in contrast to your legislative platform and our values as a community. Enforcement that these are not vacational rentals is key. Please add the inclusionary requirements for all units and enact deed restrictions or overlays to ensure these are owner-occupied households. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cameron Valentine, and then Jim Dantona.
Can you guys hear me okay? Awesome. My name is Cameron Valentine. I'm a student at Cal Poly. I'm also in the master's program for public policy. I would just like to first say that I'm in full support of, increasing San Luis Obispo's housing stock. We really need it. It's an awesome community. But I just don't think it's currently constructed, this flexible density ordinance is suitable, a little nervous, is suitable for the citizens of San Luis Obispo. I mean, even on these slides and on the website, this is marketed as, in quotes, a significant effort tied directly to the city's housing element and the major city goal for housing and homelessness. But in accomplishing this goal of addressing homelessness, the city is removing the newly created inclusionary housing requirements meant to encourage developers to build affordable housing. And in cases where developers do not construct affordable housing, it funds low and moderate income housing projects through its series of fees. While I understand that not all housing should be allocated directly towards affordability, this ordinance has no benefit to the moderate income earner and below and to the goals of the city. The median price of rent for just a studio in this city is $500 above the national average and just slightly above the state's average in most metrics. By allowing for 500 high cost or likely high cost units to be built downtown, this will not only be unaffordable to our disadvantaged citizens, but where will they be able to live with rent increasing all throughout the city? As you even said, Councilman Shoresman, I live about 2 miles away from campus because that's simply what I can afford. And I have to bike to school every day. I have friends that live by Laguna Lake and don't even have that luxury of simply biking. That is absolutely unacceptable. And that is simply with just lackluster development. Including something like this would just increase and exacerbate this issue that we're seeing throughout our community. I mean, clearly a lot is left up to the developers in this plan. We can keep asking ourselves, okay, sure, you know, maybe they will integrate more equitable housing through this, but how can we ensure that? The density resulting of these units would likely not even be appealing to the market as intended to engage. And at the end of the day, in order to have a vital city, we need all spectrums of income owners to sustain a truly functioning and equitable community. Pardon me, I lost my track. But also 60% of SLO's population are renters. And why should we make this ordinance beneficial to only the top 10% of our community? What I'm asking is not to reject this ordinance, but at least reinstate the inclusionary housing requirement. This would still allow developers and property owners freedom in deciding how expensive the development would be and give the city more funds in advancing the city's goals regarding low-income housing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
After Jim D'Antona is Babak Nafasi, and then Miles Couch.
Good evening, council members, Madam Mayor, Jim D'Antona from the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. I want to thank council and staff for the great work on this ordinance, following up on the discussion we previously had during the inclusionary housing ordinance, where this was all pulled together to have this conversation as providing additional ways to create housing downtown. The chamber has not taken official position because it was so quick to get here, but we wanted to not slow it down to make sure to have this conversation. But Mayor Stewart, to your point, we can pull together a big group of developers, and the idea was so well received and really thankful. And to be honest, even developers who are outside the city were like impressed at the thought that went into this to create housing. And I think what we heard overwhelmingly was this will be inserting small pieces into a bigger development. We probably won't see an entire development of this. So it'll fill in the spaces and add that opportunity to grow that residents in downtown. And agree with Michael that this is the first step to really putting residents here that are grow businesses, create the grocery stores. We do see this as a young professionals opportunity to get in and rent so they can be in a unit by themselves rather than sharing a unit with 4 people. And having their own space. It is really obviously to create a rental market because there is a lot to purchase. We are lacking in that rental. We love the idea of bringing it back when it's halfway, because we really don't want to see someone to put in a shoddy 500 unit application and hold down all the units without ever going to build them. So if that is happening, we have the opportunity to get in there and fix it. The final thing I'll leave with is the request about zero parking, or even further reducing that from the half to a quarter, because as staff mentioned, parking has a lot of availability. We're underserved, it's underutilized. I appreciate in the second points they were saying that they didn't want to reduce it any further because of demand. Though even earlier that said it had been underutilized. This would create a constant stream for our parking revenues if people needed it to be in the structures. But I did want to point out that the last point was so that it would create more in lieu fees. That doesn't seem maybe a reason not to consider the parking. It would actually seem to be that first point that we're underutilizing, and by reducing the costs on parking in a building, it will allow more of these units to be created.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Babak Nafisi. I'm a local resident and a land use attorney. I have a lot to cover, so I'm just going to run through it. This is, at some level, just a gift to developers. And the idea is that by giving this gift, they will build a bunch of affordable by design units. Affordable by design has proven to be a bit of a joke because when you, as Mayor Stewart sort of offhand made a comment, when studios go for $1 million, that's not affordable. So this idea was that if we build smaller units, the rent will eventually go down. But when you build market rate and high rate units, you raise the floor for what you can now charge in the city of San Luis Obispo. Which brings me to this idea of studying this in the metric, what metric to use to see what effect it's had. Well, a bunch of rentals were built in the last few years. And I know firsthand, I have a Cal Poly student who works for me. He was living in Choro and got out of it. And he thinks he has to go back home to Boston and not stay here this summer because he doesn't think he can afford the rent. So why isn't the relationship between affordability and number of units, market rates, not been studied already and informed this decision? The idea that one thing that really worries me is that we haven't even considered who will be displaced by these new units. There are a bunch of relatively affordable units in downtown, which we could lose them because somebody could come in and want to take advantage of this and other availability of favorable laws. And so what about the people who live here now who have relatively affordable rates? So there's no protection for that under this ordinance. The idea that you can't combine flexible, and by flexible, well, let's just leave it at that. The idea that you can't combine flexible with density bonus, I take issue with that. Under the density bonus program, you can come in and ask for additional height and additional FARs. So why couldn't you put one floor of 500 square foot units and then have additional floors and then ask for 2 more floors as the Choro's off-site dormitories did? So I don't think that it's a little bit of wishful thinking that some clever developer is not going to find a way to combine these different vehicles and build a really big building.
Thank you.
Our last 3 speakers are Miles Couch, Steve Del Martini, and Jordan Scheffleifer. Thank you.
Hello, I am a renter in the downtown area. I support higher density. I'm currently in a situation where I'm paying market rate rent and my landlord is planning to raise rent by 10%. They're an LLC from Silicon Valley, and I think I'd love to walk away from that and say, no, I don't want to pay that. But looking around at what's available, there just aren't enough options for rentals that I can say, no, I'm going to take this other unit instead. So I hope that this type of program could affect prices positively for renters by creating more supply. I don't think it needs to be an either or choice between affordable by design or deed restricted affordable. I think we can and should do both. I like that this will create more housing in walkable neighborhoods. We've seen a lot of new housing come up on the outskirts of town, and I think that's going to lead to a lot more cars and more traffic, which is something the city is trying to avoid. People who live in my area could easily live without a car if they're able to walk and walk to work or errands and other amenities. And I think that this is a great neighborhood to do that. I also hope that the city looks at ways to expand this to the greater downtown area than just this very small core. I live in Mitchell Park and I walk around a lot and I see commercial surface level parking lots that are barely used even at the busier times of day. There are a lot of beautiful older homes that I hope stay in place, but there are also big lots that are mostly empty or older residences that I'd love to see replaced by new apartments to help the supply issue that we have with rentals in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Steve Del Martini. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things because I thought I was clear on this before the meeting and now I'm not sure. But the waiting till there's 250 units either applied for or approved is when you would have the discussion again about how this program's going. If that's correct, I don't think you should wait until you have that much, that amount under application or under permit or ready to go, because that could be 4 years into a 5-year program. And then if you had your meeting and you found out why people weren't doing it, you wouldn't have a lot of time then to maybe change your program. You may have to offer incentives. I'd just say at 2.5 years from now, have your meeting, have a discussion, see what's going on. Maybe there's a reason that they're not building them, and maybe they need incentives, or you need to do a correction, or there needs to be something to happen just to make that move forward. So I really wouldn't wait for 250 units personally. At the Planning Commission, there was a lot of discussion about parking, and I would just say that I believe at the Planning Commission, I'll just make the statement that the parking garages are virtually never full. And I know that they gave percentages, maybe they're 80% full some nights, farmers market or Christmas parade or something, they're full, but most of the time they're not. So I think that as Mr. D'Antona said, let's use the parking garages, let's figure out a plan to put people into the parking garages with some sort of affordable parking, so that these units that don't have parking, that'll be maybe their incentive to be down there, because I think people that have cars want to be able to park them somewhere. And if there's no parking that's required, then I think they need a place to go. And that would be a good incentive to put them into the parking garages, is what I feel. There was discussion about deed restrictions. I won't go too far into that, because I think you could have a whole night's discussion on deed restrictions, but I think deed restrictions, at least in the real estate market, only work maybe in the affordable categories through HASLO or People Self-Help or something. Deed restrictions, if it's a for sale project, are not favorable with lenders much anymore. You don't have your investors coming in for the lending community and thinking it's a great thing that you have a 45-year deed restriction on a property. Okay, that's just how kind of it works right now in that deed restriction market. I will always say that I've said in the past is there's been a lot of discussion about affordable by design. I personally believe it's market by design. I think you're right. You could have that unfortunate experience where prices got to a certain point that it wasn't affordable, but that's just the way real estate works. It has worked that way for many, many years. And I just feel that that's the way this is going to work downtown. But I do think the affordability, or the more rentals you get downtown and the more vibrant you can get, the better off we'll be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jordan Schleifer. I'm a SLO County local. I've lived here my whole life. I'm also a Cal Poly student. I didn't plan to talk about this, but I wanted to throw in just my personal experience into the ring. I'm fortunate enough to be able to live with my parents still in Nipomo and then commute up to Cal Poly. But I also used to work full-time at an attorney's office just down the road over the summer. And I made $20 an hour, which comes out to about $3,200 a month. And if what Mr. Price says is accurate, about $2,500 a month rental price, that would leave me $700 to live the rest of my life. And I don't want to live with my parents forever. They're lovely, but it would be nice to be able to move out. But even working full time, there's no way I could afford anything close to what we're talking about building. And 600 square feet, I don't think any families are going to be living there. And the median income in SLO County for a non-family household is $34,000 a year. And what I was making working down the street full time was $38,000 a year, which is over the median. Half of the county makes less than that. So I'm not quite sure how, who these homes are for, or how anyone who's a young professional could possibly afford them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members, City Clerk? Okay, thank you so much. Well, thank you for everyone who's shared their public comments, and I also appreciate the many people who continue to email us and text us and call us. I just sometimes want to make sure I highlight that, because you don't maybe get to hear them right here at the podium, but we are constantly getting many pieces of input that we greatly appreciate to make these decisions. Any initial thoughts? Councilmember Shoresman?
Yeah, so this is, as we can tell, been a long time coming. It's a controversial topic, as it seems like they all are these days. We've been talking recently about how there are no easy problems anymore. They are all difficult. I think it was probably a little over a year ago that we saw the inclusionary housing ordinance. And that night we had many people that were unhappy about the inclusionary housing ordinance because it took away the incentive for affordable by design or missing middle housing. That was the table 2A that we're talking about at that point. And I agree with many of the commenters that we desperately need more affordable housing. That's what the inclusionary housing ordinance was about. And that's why I supported that ordinance, because I think that we desperately need to get more deed-restricted affordable housing for the very low income and moderate income households that can't afford. I think that's going to help us tackle all kinds of other problems. If we can just put people in homes, that'll take us a long way towards our homelessness issues as well. But in that meeting, we also heard from residents who make a decent living, not necessarily all young professionals, many older individuals I've heard from in my email and in the community, who are single or couples, and they have lived here, worked reasonable head of household jobs for a very long time, and they still can't afford to find a place to live. And these units would be perfect for somebody like that as well. So when we had the inclusionary housing ordinance discussion, we talked about that it was just one lever that we can use to push and pull and kind of get the housing types, the variety of housing types that we need. And we asked staff to come back with something that would help us, I don't want to say take the place of, but help us get more missing middle and affordable by design and household or housing, and that's what they've done here. This is just a pilot project. It's not going to be all things to all people. I fully recognize that. I think it does a decent job at blending or providing opportunities for blending affordable housing with these flexible density units. It's not going to solve all of our problems in one fell swoop. I like all of the ideas about reducing parking requirements. I think it's doing that as well. It's making the parking requirements the same. Correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but it's reducing the parking requirements in the CR zone to make them the same as they are in the CD zone. So that's an improvement right there to get towards our parking issues. And there are also options. There continue to be options, as staff went over, for if people want to reduce the amount of parking that they have in their developments further, they can still do that as well. They can get down to 0 parking places if they choose to, if they implement certain other programs to benefit their residents. So I'm happy about that. I guess the one thing that I would be interested to hear comment on from my colleagues is, one of our public commenters mentioned, when is the right time for this to come back to council to kind of reevaluate and look at the metrics? And that seems like a hard, you could have 250 units permitted and none of them built. So, is that a good time to evaluate the program when you haven't actually had anybody live in any of the units? You don't know what the rents are really going for. So I don't know, maybe there's some happy medium with a certain number built plus a certain number permitted. So I would be curious to hear what my colleagues have to say about that. Also, I'm interested in the idea of limiting homestay ability with these units. I don't know how we can thread that needle. It sounds like staff might have some ideas to take that idea back and look at it a little bit further, but we know that that's an issue. And with units this small, that we really want, if the intention is to have people living downtown in these units, then I'd like to figure out a way to work that into the equation somehow. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Councilmember. City Manager and Mr. Codron, would you like to give your staff response that I skipped over?
Yeah, let's hear from Director Codron. I do have some language if the council, there's consensus to preclude homestays. There's some simple language we could add as we've done to exclude the provisions of of density bonus, because that's very explicit on page 277.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. There were just a couple of points that I wanted to hit on. One actually goes back to Councilmember Marks's question earlier on, and just in terms of how these units will be spread throughout the area where we're, the project area, the downtown core. I think the one thing that I wanted to highlight is that probably the most difficult place to construct a building in the downtown core is in the downtown historical district. And so the historical district itself, in terms of, the Hands building that you mentioned there on Higuera Street near Garden, very difficult to, take an existing building and add on to that. So I think that the places where you're going to see new projects are in locations where there are surface level parking lots, or there is a building that's already vacant for some reason. And we really don't see too many projects where you have like a thriving retail space on the ground floor and leased up units above a project coming and redeveloping that. That's a property that likely has a mortgage against it, and there's revenue coming in every month. Very few projects anywhere in the city that you see where that economic activity gets stopped in favor of a new development. So I thought that would be helpful. The other question was just about, in terms of public comment, we did a lot of outreach for this project. We heard a lot of really good ideas, and I just wanted Kyle to go back maybe to the slide that he has about all the other things that we're doing to implement our major city goal and our housing programs. This is one narrowly tailored project, but there is a lot that we're trying to do to improve affordability through a variety of efforts. But I would say the overarching goal of the city is housing production, and at least trying to achieve our 1% growth management objective. And more housing does affect price. It's one of the most fundamental principles in economics. Is relative to supply and demand. And so the more supply you have, the lower the price will be, or the less upward pressure on price you will have, because there is so much demand. I mean, we live in the place that's, I think we would all agree, is like, this is the best place in the world. If there's any place I could choose, it might be here. And I think there's a lot of people thinking that. And what we saw over the past few years was, now with people having the ability to move here and work remotely, I think that's been a big contributor to the upward pressure on prices that you're seeing, that has been mitigated by some of the supply we're delivering. But obviously, we're not able to deliver enough supply to just outright lower prices. I think the general plan annual report, as City Manager Johnson mentioned, is a great way for us annually to give you an update on how this program is doing. And certainly in 2 years, 2.5 years, regardless of the number, like maybe no units are being proposed. And I think the council would want to maybe reconsider the program or policy if that were the case. So happy to report on this every year with the general plan annual report, and come back formally to the city council in 2.5 years. And finally, just one clarification on incomes, median income in San Luis Obispo County, just for reference, for an individual, $76,450, for a two-person household, $87,350, for a four-person household, $109,200. That's the median income. And so you get above market when you're 120% of what somebody making, $109,000 can afford. So there is room to produce more affordable housing. It's going to be above moderate housing. There is no market rate. There's no housing production that occurs in the city that qualifies as affordable under our regional housing need allocation reporting, other than ADUs. Half of every ADU counts as a low-income unit. But in terms of all of the market rate production we do, it's above moderate. But that doesn't mean that it's sky high. We can, by providing a variety and providing the supply, put downward pressure on prices.
Thank you so much. We have Vice Mayor Marks, then Councilmember Pease, then Councilmember Francis. Vice Mayor Marks, don't touch it.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say, to reinforce what some of the public commenters were saying about the price of rentals, and the market determines the rent. I just looked up a studio apartment over there on Orcutt, and there's brand new apartments that have been built. It's $2,340 a month for a studio apartment, and $2,944 a month for a 1-bed, 1-bathroom a month. These are brand new. They're probably really cute. They're over there on Orcutt. I haven't seen them. I know that the ADUs that are being built near Cal Poly are going for $2,500, $3,000 because the students are desperate for housing, and the price is determined by what the market will bear. Okay, so I just wanted to get that out of the way. So to me, the purpose of this program that's proposed is not affordable housing. It's more housing. It's more housing in the downtown. And to me, the policy goal is to make the downtown more of a viable neighborhood. I love one of the requirements of the city of San Francisco that there has to be a little bodega, a little grocery store on every corner, right? I've been trying for years to get developers in the downtown to at least commit to having a little grocery store of some kind, so that people can go at least buy milk and bread and maybe a beer, something like that. I think that it's good if we get a checkup on what this program is doing every year. If it's not, it sounds to me like it could just be folded in. I wanted to say that the size of these units, they're very small. Like a double wide trailer is about 700 square feet, a double wide trailer. A single wide trailer would be about 500 square feet. So that's about what we're talking about. It's like a single wide trailer. Some of our ADUs are this size. So basically, I think prohibiting homestays in these apartments is a good idea. I don't know how they could do a homestay anyway. If it's just 1 bedroom or a studio, I don't understand how you could possibly do it. I'm interested in and this is more of a question than anything else, is if would something like the Housing Authority or People Self-Help, would some of these nonprofits that are interested in affordable housing be interested in working with a developer to say, we'd like to finance the construction of some of these, and then they could possibly be under their program, right? So this would not be us saying that it has to be deed restricted. it would be, the question would be, is there any way that this kind of opportunity could be made attractive to someone who wants to develop that kind of housing in the downtown? So I think it is a pilot project. I'm interested in seeing what happens with it, but I don't. I can't imagine that it's actually, even if the supply is increased, I can't imagine that it's going to bring down the rental price very much, because people are scrambling. I have to say, I have 2 grown grandchildren right now who are trying to find a place to rent in San Luis Obispo, and it's just crazy, you know. So those are my comments for now.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this program. Thanks for all of the outreach, just a lot of outreach, a lot of feedback. I appreciate hearing from the community. I am supportive of the program. I think to Vice Mayor Marks's comment, this is about increasing supply, and I think we've had a lot of clarity about that. So I am in support of the waiving the inclusionary housing fee for those qualified units as written. So I wouldn't change that at this point. And then the parking, I'd probably leave as it is right now as well, because I would imagine that a lot of these are going to be using the in lieu fee, and in kind of our bigger thinking about the parking fund is that maybe it's a transportation inclusive, and that some of that in lieu fee could support our transit and multimodal kinds of options, right? So I think that the funding that would go into the parking fund is not just is not literally parking, but helping those who are convenient to downtown to be able to get around in a bigger way. I think, thank you for the clarification about the group housing, and I hope that we kind of talk that up a little. I think that this is, there's an historic precedent for this type of second story existing units that maybe have been converted to offices, but maybe used to be that type of model, and there really could be some improved affordability or even options, so that maybe folks who are accustomed to sharing a house could actually move into this type of units, get similar kinds of rents, but then free up a house for folks who truly need a house environment, maybe with kids or pets or whatever. So so I hope that we can kind of talk that up, be able to get the word out. What does it really require? What triggers it? And how it could be utilized in this setting. I appreciate the annual check-in. I think that's a fine metric. And then if we need something more robust in 2.5 years, so I'm comfortable with that. I think we added clarity about what the metrics are that we're looking for. So I don't think we need additional direction. And I think it's a great pilot program. I hope that it does take off. I mean, I think it's a great way to just be able to tuck units in if that helps with some other developments around town. So pilot program, let's keep going. Okay, so I think the one change that I would be interested in is about the homestay program. I would be interested in prohibiting. It doesn't sound like it would get taken up much anyway, but if there were a condo kind of development that were allowed, I think that kind of keeping that out of these flex density units. My concern is that the program has been, that it is about second homes, as Councilmember Shoresman talked about. That perhaps somebody is claiming it as a primary residence, but they're actually part of a couple and they're living someplace else. And this is, you know, their San Luis Obispo home, and good for them. I mean, you know, yay, I want to be able to come and have a place to stay, but I don't want them to be able to then generate income for a whole bunch of the time. And then they're just keeping this unit available for them for, you know, their own occasional weekends, right? So we want people living in them. So I think that for now, just kind of saying no homestays in the qualified units, in the flex density units would serve the purpose. And I think that we should, I'm not sure when that kind of comes up for us to check in on that homestay program anyway. What's that?
We have mine and Emily's conversation, and then we could do that with everyone.
Oh, or it was more of a question if that program is coming up for a review at some point on its own, or if we need to give direction to bring that in front of us.
If council's inclined to want us to come back and do something, we're happy to do that. Perhaps the annual report's on consent. So if you want to ask us, you're probably looking at fall. It's currently, if that's something you want to take a look at separate, or we can give you a memo. I would suggest we give you a memo.
I think just kind of getting an update and seeing what the status is sometime in the next year, not even a rush. So I think in terms of, and I don't, want to sidetrack us too much, but because I think in terms of just focusing on this, I think there's enough kind of gaps in our program right now that I'd rather, until we fix it, just keep it out of this program. I think those were the things that I wanted to cover.
Okay, thank you. I thought you were asking in this group if we were going to talk about it on page 277. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you. Can I ask a quick question of staff? I'm wondering, these units will end up being considered multifamily or apartments, right? So they'd be subject to state renters protections. Is that a correct assessment with like limits on annual rent increases and all of that?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. I'm going to start by saying that this type of program I'm really excited to see in our downtown. Something we really haven't talked about as much in this discussion is, the ability to walk and bike. This is kind of our big multimodal focus here, and getting more folks in that downtown core, both to build vibrancy, but also just to limit the amount of distance they have to travel is incredibly important. And I think coming back to the comments around, recognizing the need and desire to revitalize downtown as a neighborhood, it's a super important goal of this particular ordinance. I think we're all aware of our state housing shortage. We're 2.5 million units short last I saw. But the really important piece of that number that we have to remember is that 1 million of those units need to be affordable, and that means deed restricted affordable units. And I'm just putting that number out there. I know that the goal of this project isn't affordability, but that we really need to be making sure that our affordable projects are keeping pace with our other types of projects if we're going to hit the state, these shortages that we have as a state. I really appreciated Councilmember Pease's comments around other types of housing. As somebody who grew up for a good portion of my childhood in a boarding house situation, these types of projects serve such an important purpose. And I was really excited to hear Mr. Bell talk about how we already have programs in place. And I would echo Councilmember Pease's comments that I would love to see us really highlighting that program and encouraging more of those types of projects to be built. I just as we're thinking and talking about this, there's just a lot to process as far as, we talked about trying to encourage these smaller units because of affordable by design, but I think, many of us out here have commented that affordable by design, isn't affordable. So I just want to make sure we're being really clear-eyed about what these units will be, and they are going to fill a very specific purpose, but it's it's not going to be an affordability piece. I'm really eager to see us return. I like the idea of the annual report on this, so thank you for that. Making sure that if we're not getting folks building downtown, looking at what we can do to encourage that building, and if the types of units that are being built aren't the types of units that we really want to see, maybe thinking about how we can tweak the program, pull different levers in order to get the types of units we want to see down there. I think we kept hearing from a lot of folks tonight that the rent is too high, and this type of housing program isn't going to address that. In fact, as Vice Mayor Marks pointed out, in some ways, we might be just looking at getting some of these more luxury rental units, which also just kind of drives up average rent prices. And that's a real struggle for me in looking at something like this. So I just stewing on how we can potentially look at other levers to pull in order to ensure that we do have affordable rentals for people in town. Because I think free market and supply alone, as somebody, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting who mentioned, we've had folks flood into the community looking to remote work in this beautiful place. And that's great, welcome to everyone, but it is, supply alone is not outstripping demand. And so we're not going to see a real downward pressure on rents as a result of building these units. So all of that being said, I want to make sure that we have that check-in so we can really make sure that we have that occupancy and that we're, of course, blocking any homestays in these units. But I also think that this program is really an important piece of bringing vitality and that neighborhood feel to downtown. So with all of those caveats, I'm going to be eager to support it.
Thank you, Councilmember Francis. I have a couple questions before I share my deliberations. So one, either Mr. Codron or City Attorney, I believe that we've talked about this before around local preference and the challenges with that. I understand we couldn't mandate it, but could we do it as a benefit in a sense to encourage a developer to do a local preference around these units?
Typically, how we accomplish that is through the development agreement tool. And that's those were things that we negotiated with both Avila Ranch and San Luis Ranch.
And that's still possible?
A development agreement?
The local, I thought we were saying maybe we couldn't include that in development agreements in the future.
There are ways that you can craft them. You have to be very careful not to run afoul of fair housing laws, and particularly in a community like ours, which is disproportionately white, that you are at greater risk of running up against fair employment and housing laws because local preference tends to perpetuate a lack of diversity in your community and therefore run into racial equity and discrimination laws.
Yep, absolutely. That makes sense. Thank you. And do you either of you have, or any of you have the actual average rental prices? Because I know that I appreciate, Vice Mayor, what you found, but there's actually some average rental prices that are in our area. And I know that we had some of those in some past reports. So I'll let you look that up as I add to the rest of it. Yeah.
On that subject, I think I just want to be clear that if the council does move forward with this, our ability to track this is somewhat limited. So, we don't have a lot of visibility on what private transactions are for rental. We can give you a general market sense, but I just want to be clear, and we'll do our best on reporting back. But I want to just be clear that we're not going to be able to tell you, what are all these units renting for.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. There's literally no way we would know that. But I just remember looking in past staff reports and that we have reported out on that in the past. So just thought it would be helpful. So I will say supply and demand, anything we can do more to get more housing, that is definitely a goal. And so I appreciate the slide that showed this is one of many tools. And some of you have mentioned that already. And I very much agree with that, is we have to look at all of this. The one thing that was mentioned from one of our public commenters brought me pause, though, around the inclusionary housing ordinance exception, because if these units are not a whole development of small units and it's kind of they're tucked into other sorry, I can't think of the word, development complexes. If they're tucked in, then we kind of lose the inclusionary housing ordinance aspect of those other developments. So I think I'm kind of confused now again around us removing the inclusionary housing or having an inclusionary housing ordinance exception on these size units if they're tucked into a larger development. Does that make sense?
In that they'd be taking up space. They'd be taking up space that could be larger.
Kind of. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. So here, this was also in the agenda correspondence. Excuse me. The reference is a scenario for a mixed project that includes flexible units, standard rental units, and commercial space. So as you can see here, the inclusionary housing requirement for a rental project is 6% of the base density, which in this case would be those 8 two-bedroom units, would equate to a minimum of 1 inclusionary housing unit within the project or payment of the in lieu fee. Extending this to apply to flexible density units within the project would be 6% of those units as well. So 6% of 24 is 4. Yes. So that was that is what changes. But those 24 units wouldn't have otherwise been allowed without the program to begin with. So we are, it's a kind of a give and take trade-off.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I definitely do appreciate the coming back every year. I think that'd be a great idea. There was someone also who asked around who would be displaced, and I was thinking that these would be more brand new units, so there really wouldn't be people displaced, but can you share on that?
Yes. Yes, the City of SLO actually has a wonderful ordinance called the Downtown Housing Conversion Ordinance. So there are protections in place for converting or displacing residents who are existing within the downtown area, not just the core, but the entire planning area, which I actually have a map from our general plan handy. Here we go. So every project within this area would be protected under the downtown conversion laws that would establish a voucher system for displacements, rules against increasing rents, and there's a whole slew of other protections in place to ensure that our existing rental housing units or the existing housing units in our downtown area are preserved and not impacted by new development.
Great, thank you. I just want to make sure that was out in public, publicly said, because I think it's important to understand that we're trying to grow the housing to help more people have housing, not to harm people that are currently in housing. Okay, so yes, I am supportive of this program. I think, I do think fair market value is going to still cause us challenges in affordability. There's no question that once this gets full, people love to be downtown in any great thriving area, and ours is no different. I mean, I think we're at the fifth best Mission Plaza. I mean, we could go on all the lists of different things that we have that make our community great. So I don't think these will actually be the affordable ones in the long run, quite honestly. Maybe less than a larger one, but that's kind of just how it goes, I guess. I am thinking that I appreciate the parking conversation, and I think that we can leave the parking as is, as you have in the staff report. I really love the idea, Councilmember Pease talking about, the fund that maybe microtransit or some other things could be utilized with this funding. So I think that's great. And I do think supply, having an increased supply will be helpful no matter what. I mean, we need to have more housing. The longer we have less housing, the longer we have problems. I would love in future engagement, if there is possible, for the developers or something to include, like FC&I and foster youth that have come out of their, they age out, and where could they live, and if they're living on their own. And there's just some different ways I think we could look at this, and maybe that boarding opportunity could help with that. So just trying to think of if there's ways that we can encourage people kind of broadening the individuals who could live in these units. That would be really great. Let's see, what else was there? I think that's it. I mean, I think at this point, I'm very excited to see what programs will be brought to, or sorry, what developments will be brought to us. And when I say us, meaning staff and the city and how this will work, I look forward to our yearly-ish update. And I think that is all my updates or all my comments. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I'm prepared to make a motion. I wanted to clarify something with staff before making that motion. I think I heard general consensus about having some sort of homestay restrictions from my colleagues. And so I'm wondering if that's something, adding that language quickly on the fly, you would want to try to do that now, or if you'd want to come back to us with that and just, make the motion based on the pending language.
Yeah, thank you.
From my perspective, I think, sorry, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Shoresman, I think that language is pretty straightforward. Homestays authorized under section 17.86.16L shall not be allowed. And that's pretty simple. And so we'll find the place in the ordinance for that to go. But if that's acceptable to the city attorney, just to have that on record, we'll find the appropriate place for it to be codified within the draft ordinance.
And then we would just see it in the second reading when it comes back. Okay, well, on that note then, with that suggestion by the city manager, I'll make the motion to approve staff's recommendation with that addition, homestay language.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis?
Yeah, just before we move on, you had asked a really good question about the local's preference. And what I thought I heard city attorney saying was that it was possible with careful language. And I didn't know if you had meant to leave behind that discussion yet, or if we might want to return to talking about how we could potentially put in some sort of local preference program with careful language that wouldn't violate any housing laws.
I would be open to that if all of the colleagues would be as well. Councilmember Pease?
Because we have had this conversation many times, so the development agreement is very project specific, so that we actually can't write it into the ordinance. We can't write it into the program language, is my understanding. And that development agreements are super specific. They have to fit the right size and have mutual interest, right? And then, and again, just for the public, when we talk about local preference, what we're really trying to do is folks who are already working in the city, give them opportunities to live in the city where they work, or they're already living in the city and working in the city. So,
City Attorney?
Yes, what I was saying is that the development agreement is the mechanism by which we can most directly do that and negotiate for the developer to implement some of these requirements. If the council is interested in giving majority direction for our office to go research mechanisms by which we could integrate language that could be defensible into a regulatory structure for this voluntary opt-in program, that is direction I will take from the majority, if that's your preference.
Yeah, I think that for me, when I brought it up, I was thinking of it as an encouragement kind of aspect for, I didn't think it would have to actually go in the ordinance, knowing that it is a developer agreement. But if there is some way we should put something in the ordinance to say that we encourage people lowering their GHG by coming to live near where they work. Probably wouldn't put that entire sentence, but this is our goal. And as we're having people that, we're just talking about the gentleman out there earlier who was saying he would like to live near where he works, but yet we can't. And then someone else mentioned around corporations coming and buying up a bunch of things from out of the area. I think we're trying to help manage that a little bit.
Right. I think I understand the council's objectives and why you're hearing more potential flexibility for me here is because this is a voluntary opt-in project, right? This is not a regulatory structure that requires every development in San Luis Obispo to implement a preference program. So if the majority of the council is interested, I don't want to, this is certainly not something we're going to craft on the fly. But I can go back and we can produce a memo that perhaps explores whether there's some flexibility in that range.
I would be interested in that memo if that is possible.
City Manager, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I just want to concur with the city attorney. So if that's the direction of the council, I would recommend you table this. We'll come back in the July timeframe when there's time on the council agenda, and then we can give it some thought to help respond to the council's direction. I just want to caution the council as your policy advisor that, you know, there's competing elements of this, right? As we start to load up requirements, you may have developers who say, I'm not interested in doing this because it comes with too many strings. Development agreements are fairly difficult to administer. You can just, you'll see on your consent calendar, you've got reports that are required by both state law and both by our ordinance, and they go through all the requirements, report on that, and those cost anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 a year to produce those reports. And so those are in the perpetuity of as the project's under development. So I just want to caution the council as we start to go down these paths, you know, are we achieving the same goals? From my perspective, doing policy for a few decades, when policies try to solve a lot, sometimes they get so loaded up that at the end of the day, you know, people get frustrated that, well, why didn't it work? It's because the complicating factors are sometimes an obstacle. But so I offer that, but we can come back if that's the council's direction, and we can give you the memo and provide you some option to achieve those outcomes.
Thank you, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. What I thought I heard the council saying was that you wanted to move forward with the program, with the direction that you've provided, and that you were interested in exploring further options. I was understanding you to have an annual review scheduled in, and perhaps I could produce for the council a memorandum that outlines some potential alternatives for a voluntary program that you could consider, and at the next review of the program, you could consider whether there's a problem we're actually solving for, where you have some data with the initial rollout of the program, and then have in mind some alternatives that you could consider if you identified that to be a problem.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, thank you, City Attorney. The intention here was not to delay or slow down the rollout of this ordinance. And in fact, knowing that this language doesn't go into the ordinance, this was more of an exploratory, what would this language look like in the development agreement, and is it even possible legal, and also just an examination of would it prevent these types of projects from being built. So just want to be super clear here. This is not seeking to table this until July.
Thank you, City Manager Johnson.
That's really, really helpful. I just want to if the question is whether or not these new additional policies, where it would or would not, be economically infeasible, that's a different question. And so I can work with Mr. Cadre to see what it would take. That's essentially, we'd need to run some pro forma analysis to see, well, what would be the additional costs associated with, and then the council would have some objective standards. If you recall, that's part of the analysis we did for inclusionary housing ordinance. We did that kind of threshold analysis of looking at what are the thresholds by which, the level of a fee would otherwise stifle investment.
Thank you. Councilmember Shorson, did you want to? Okay.
I was just seeking clarification. I think I was understanding Councilmember Francis to want to put this actually into the program and look at it again in July, and I wasn't sure that was where we really wanted to go. So I appreciate your clarification on that, Councilmember Francis. And So I think if I'm understanding correctly, just to summarize where we're at, we are still interested in my original motion of supporting staff's recommendation with the addition of the homestay language that City Manager Johnson added for this evening, but then looking at language in the future that we might be able to put into development agreements to include some local preference type language in the future. Is that correct?
That would be correct to me. I'd be happy to second that.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, before you take the vote, can I ask for just a little bit of clarification on the types of programs that you're looking to explore?
Yeah.
You're looking for local worker preference, local resident preference, or both?
It's a great question. I think local worker preference, if you're already living here, would that be necessary? I guess maybe. I think probably both. Sorry, had to talk that out loud.
There are some different objectives. Some are preservation of gentrification of neighborhoods is often why different jurisdictions around the country, and not all of them with laws similar to those in California. So why I'm being a little bit hesitant here. But if your objective is to sort of preserve longevity in neighborhoods and that type of thing, and give protections to residents of older neighborhoods that might be transforming somewhat, that's one objective. And so that might include a local resident preference as well as a local worker preference, which is designed to allow people who are serving your community but not otherwise able to afford to live in your community sort of first right of refusal on available housing as it comes up. So there are different objectives you might be wanting to achieve, and I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the analysis that the majority of the council is wanting to hear.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Council Member Francis?
Yeah, reading between the lines there, City Attorney, I think the hesitancy is coming from the equity issues embedded in doing local resident preference up front. I really want to make sure we're avoiding that, and I think that's when we get into some dangerous territory with this local preference. So I think we need to, if I'm clear, make sure we expand it to folks who live and work in the county. So keep it pretty broad, just kind of first right of refusal. So it'd be preference, but not exclusion. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm definitely not trying to exclude, but I guess, because why I'm pondering and pausing is because of the example you gave earlier, Councilmember Pease, around, living college life, and then young professional wants to live on their own. And then if we don't have that ability to live here, then now they're living out in Santa Maria but already had their job here, that defeats the purpose. So that's why I was kind of wondering if there's an ability to do the resident and the worker aspect together. So Councilmember Shoresman.
I think my initial thoughts were around local worker to kind of address some of our climate and neighborhood issues, but I'm open to what the rest of the council has to say about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease.
And I would lean toward similar to what we have in our current programs, where it's work or live in the city is kind of the first round, then goes to county. And that's, again, if somebody is older and has been living in a house, or the student model that you say, folks that are already here, feels like they shouldn't be penalized. So it's more of it still has to do with having people be able to live and work and or be a part of the community that they've been a part of for a long time. Hopefully that's enough clarification. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. So we have Councilmember Shoresman making the motion, myself being the second, and can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Shoresman?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
The motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, let's take a quick 5-minute stretch break, not a 10-minute leave forever, and then we'll get back to the last item. All right, thanks everyone for taking a little quick break here. We're going to go ahead and get moving on the homelessness response strategic plan, which we've seen a few times now, which is great. And thank you so much to staff to continually taking in our input and moving it forward. So go ahead and pass it off to Daisy and to Teresa.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. We're very pleased to be here this evening to cross a finish line on proposing adoption of the city's first strategic plan. You've seen parts of it several times, and now we have before you the whole package. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Daisy to present the final product.
Thank you, Teresa. Good evening, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. We are grateful to be presenting the City of San Luis Obispo's first homelessness. Sorry. Sorry about that. Still on that. Still.
Just go ahead and do what you did again. I'll get you to it.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, open that. Hold that over there.
That's the issue.
Now go back here. Share screen.
Then we're there.
Now over here, you're going to make it.
I thought I would get it this time, but I didn't. Second time. Okay, we'll start over. But we're grateful to be presenting the City of San Luis Obispo's first homelessness response strategic plan for adoption tonight after a year and a half of developing, fine-tuning, and implementing elements of the plan. The recommendation we are making tonight is for City Council to adopt a resolution approving the city's first homelessness response strategic plan. The agenda for tonight's hearing includes a brief background and timeline on the strategic planning process to date, a review of the city's strategic plan vision that has guided our efforts, an overview of the framework and public engagement activities that took place to inform the strategic plan, an update on the changes that were incorporated into the strategic plan since our last study session on February 7th, and a discussion about next steps in the strategic planning process. Over the last several years, the city and city council have made preventing and addressing homelessness a key priority with our major city goals, as well as working to align our efforts with the countywide plan to address homelessness. Council received presentations on the city's homelessness response strategic plan in November of 2021, September of 2022, and February of 2023, and we are returning tonight to present the full version of the plan for adoption. After working through the first 4 stages on this methodology graphic and implementing elements of the plan throughout, we are now prepared to move fully into the implementation stage. The current strategic plan covers a 2-year period from 2022 to 2024, and at the conclusion of those 2 years, the city will present an updated plan to build upon the current efforts. We would like to revisit the strategic plan vision statement, which has served as the foundation for our strategic planning efforts. The vision statement reads, all community members in SLO City are empowered to successfully prevent and address concerns related to homelessness through equitable access to a variety of resources. Periods of unsheltered homelessness within SLO City are brief due to the city's capacity to conduct timely outreach and connect to a range of emergency and transitional shelter and housing options through local and regional resources. Building off of that vision, public engagement has been a critical component of our strategic planning process. Valuable feedback was gathered through feedback sessions with key stakeholders, in-person surveys with individuals experiencing homelessness, and an online community survey. Since our last presentation in February, we have analyzed the public engagement data, and a comprehensive overview is included in the strategic plan. The 3 online survey questions highlighted here depict the widespread impact that homelessness has on our community, from individuals personally experiencing homelessness or being at risk of homelessness, to those of us who know friends and family members who have experienced or are experiencing homelessness, to community members who observe people experiencing homelessness on a frequent or daily basis. While this 2-year strategic plan does not provide a solution for homelessness, it does provide tangible, impactful steps that the city is committed to take to continue working to prevent and address homelessness in and for our community. As discussed in the 2 previous study sessions, the 5 key components outlined in the strategic plan are regional collaboration and engagement, communications, data, pilot programs, and funding opportunities. These key components were reviewed by Council in November of 2021 and serve as the foundation for the city's strategic plan, intentionally aligning with the lines of effort outlined in the countywide plan to address homelessness. During the February 7th study session, we presented the strategic plan framework for Council's review. Feedback that was received during that session was incorporated into the final version of the strategic plan, and the key changes are highlighted here. Based on Council's recommendations, the framework was updated to prioritize the regional collaboration and engagement component. The pilot programs component was updated to make the distinction between existing city programs and new pilot program initiatives more clear. Prevention objectives were incorporated into the key tasks. The scope of the city's outreach efforts was expanded to include street outreach in addition to encampments. Information about the city's safe housing and Cal Poly's educated renter programs was added. The measures of success for each key component were updated to focus more clearly on the city's direct measures of success rather than county-focused measures. Potential quantitative metrics were included as an appendix to the plan to demonstrate measures that will be taken to develop baseline data in this first 2-year plan, and a comprehensive list of key stakeholders that were engaged throughout the planning process was included. One additional change was brought to our attention by Council regarding the point-in-time count data referenced on page 9 of the plan. The average percentage of individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness is listed as 64%, but the correct percentage is 37%. That correction will be made on the strategic plan document before print. And I would now like to direct Council's attention to the next steps we've identified. We will continue our ongoing implementation of the key tasks outlined in the strategic plan. We will continue to prioritize engagement of our key stakeholder groups in an effort to work collaboratively to prevent and address homelessness in our community. We will continue to monitor metrics, community needs, and regional priorities to inform the next phase of the strategic plan, and we will prepare City Council presentations to update all of you on the implementation of our plan. And the success of any planning effort is dependent on the effort, collaboration, and investment of those tasked with executing it. We are grateful for the constructive feedback and solution-minded perspectives that each of the individuals and organizations listed here provided throughout our strategic planning process. Mayor Stewart and members of the council, including former Councilmember Christensen, our community partners, including the county's Homeless Services Division, CAP SLO and the team at 40 Prado, Downtown SLO and their ambassador program, the city's Homelessness Response Steering Committee and other city staff, and our deeply committed, hardworking field team, our CAT and MCU teams, our Parks and Recreation Rangers, our Public Works and Code Enforcement teams, our city biologists, and all of the departments who provide support. We would also like to highlight the key stakeholders who took part in focused feedback sessions and provided honest, constructive insight that helped shape the city's strategic plan. Thank you to the homeless services providers, housing services providers, healthcare providers, activist groups, business community, and faith-based groups who invested their time and expertise into this process. And thank you to each of the community members who voiced their priorities and concerns through our online survey and who remain committed to strengthening our San Luis Obispo community. We would like to direct any community members who are interested in learning more about the strategic plan to visit the homelessness response page on our city website, which features a link to the full strategic plan. And now we would like to end this presentation with our recommendation for City Council to adopt a resolution approving the city's first homelessness response strategic plan. Thank you, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. We would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much. It's like tied up in the most perfect bow after the many meetings that we have done. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Do we have any comments or questions from council members? Any public comment?
Yes, we have one, Jordan Schleifer.
All right.
Hi, good evening. No, I want to give a few thoughts of mine, but I just want to say I think I understand the purpose of this plan. If I don't, I apologize in advance. I just want to say that I know that addressing a problem like homelessness is extremely difficult. There's so many facets to it, and there's issues with funding and jurisdictional issues that affect what the city can do. I read as the addendum to this that the implementation only has $11,400. I don't know. I mean, that's what was on the little thingy. I don't know. That seems a little low to me. I hope they can accomplish all their goals with that, because it's a great, well-written proposal. I did just want to say that I was hoping that the city would consider taking advantage of the pilot programs. Section 4.1 says that the city will continue development and operation of the existing pilot programs that they've worked on already. However, as noted in the summary section, the city does not have dedicated funding streams for homelessness response programs. And I just thought it would be nice to see in 4.1 added, I mean, it's probably too late at this point, but establishing a dedicated funding stream for those existing programs, as long as they're working, to move beyond the pilot program status, as well as adding a little bit more detail as to how new pilot programs can be funded. It seems to me that since the city and the county have to work so closely, that if the city focused more on the micro pilot program side of things and allowed the city or the county to work on the macro infrastructure-based needs, that could be a really successful partnership. I didn't see too much of that language in the report. And I'm sure you guys have done far more research than me, but I will say in advance of today, I went with some care packages I made to go talk to some of the homeless community. And a lot of what they said is county jurisdiction, but there was one thing that I thought was weird that I got a couple times, was they were much more willing to talk to me once I told them that I wasn't from the city and that I was just a community member. Then they were willing to open up a lot more. And I don't know why that is. And I just thought maybe that's something to note. But the whole thing, addressing homelessness it's something that affects everybody who lives in SLO, obviously, especially those who are in that situation. I wish everyone the best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any other commenters? Okay, thank you. Any initial staff response?
The staff report indicated some funding that was allocated for the preparation of the plan, and that was the amount that was indicated, that $11,000 was indicated just to kind of continue, publishing the plan and taking care of some of the those items directly related to it. But obviously, the city has invested quite a considerable amount of money over the several years on these pilot programs and on all of the staff that Daisy thanked in daily work, and that's indicated on the city's website under homelessness response. So I just wanted to make that distinction, and then of course appreciating the hard work of all of these folks and community members, as was just indicated by the speaker, the hard work that it takes to address and impactfully address homelessness every day.
I also wanted to mention that the city and city council, as I said earlier, has continued to make housing and homelessness a priority through our major city goals, and with that, funding is allocated for the programs and services that are outlined in the strategic plan. So the city has definitely invested a lot of resources towards addressing and preventing homelessness.
Great, thank you so much. I know that there have been many dollars that have been in the budget since the small amount of time that I've been on the board or on the council. So, Councilmember Francis, you had your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Staff actually addressed it. I just really wanted to make sure that they did a really lovely job pointing out that none of the actual programs were included in that budget, and that there were dozens of programs that are all separately funded that make up all of the money that we spend as a city. So thank you for addressing that.
Yeah, thank you. And it is true, when people come in and just get to see something last minute, they don't know all the parts of it. So I think it's great to be able to say it over and over again so everyone gets to hear it, which is great. And I think there's the really great page in here that I can't find right now, page 366. I think you might have had a slide of it, and it was all the intersectionality between all the partners. It had like light blue circles on it. And to me, the regional aspect, which was number one on your items, is so important because there are so many different funding aspects, so many different staff members that are part of this, volunteers that are part of this, laws and regulations. So trying to help people actually get into housing and services, we have to do this all together. So I'm really thrilled to see this plan and all the work that's gone into it. Councilmember Pease.
Thank you, and we have spent a lot of time on that. I do appreciate the revisions. I think it really has come together really well. I think the adjustments to clarity around the pilot programs versus those that are ongoing, that was a concern I had last time. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to, I'd like to move adoption of the homelessness response strategic plan.
We have a potential one more comment. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, just to echo my thanks to staff for you had a great program or a great plan to begin with, and it's clear that over the multiple study sessions that we've had, you've listened to the feedback that you've gotten from the community and from the dais, and included a lot of the things that we had suggested. And so it's great to see that. I think there's some synergy there, and it's become a better plan overall. And it's only a 2-year plan, so we're already kind of halfway through the period. So I know that there will be revisions and changes coming. And hopefully by that point, the county's plan will have been implemented for a while. And so there will be more opportunities to find the nexuses and the partnerships and the greater coordination and the greater support for that countywide plan. Because as our commenter noted, this is obviously not a city-specific plan. This is a regional and a state issue, homelessness is, and we can't solve any of these problems on our own. We definitely need to all work together on this. And also just wanted to mention, Jordan, you know, as other staff and Councilmember Francis said, we have dedicated over the last couple of years much more than is noted in the staff report. And as Daisy noted too, this is continuing to be one of our major city goals for the next 2 years. And so I think as we get into the work plan and rest of the financial planning process for the next 2 years, you'll see that funding for those pilot projects is, I'm expecting that it will continue because that's the guidance that we've given to staff over the next couple of years. But I think there is also an intention of finding the successes in these pilot projects and hoping that others will pick them up and see fit to fund them in other ways or find other funding sources to braid with the city's funding that we've already put into this. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the future as well.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this was a very well done report, and I appreciate the public comment to that effect. It's wonderful. You know, I have to say that there are times that I feel really hopeless about the homeless situation. that this strategic plan, at least it's kind of a roadmap of things that can be done, and we can't solve everything. We can't help every single person who needs help, but at least as a city, this is a way forward. And I think our governor called homelessness a humanitarian crisis, which I think it is. And then recently I heard someone told me that the president of the United States has called it an American problem, that it's a nationwide problem. Of course, we feel it right here in our city of San Luis Obispo because we have a very caring community. And I think this is a great step forward. I would like to encourage people who are interested in paying attention to the budget hearings that are coming up and the work plans that are going to be presented. When we go through the budget hearings, then you'll be looking at actual programs and actual dollar amounts. You know, so this is a roadmap. It's not a destination. So with that, I'm definitely in support of the staff recommendation. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Yeah, and most of what I was going to say has already been said, so I won't repeat it. I'm just so grateful for all the hard work that's gone into this, and really eager to have it passed, and would be happy to second the motion.
Thank you so much. I think we are at that point that Councilmember Pease was motioning. Yes? Any other updates that we need to add to it? Okay, wonderful. Councilmember Francis is second, and can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Francis?
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Marks?
Yes.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, now we have the liaison reports and communications, and I will just start us off. This has been a very busy past couple of weeks. Let's see, 3 of us went to the Civic Well Conference, which is focused on climate, and that was on the city funds. That was Councilmember Pease, Councilmember Francis, and myself. Also, went to the SLOMA opening with Morella Zacharias, and if you have not seen that, I would really encourage you to go and see her work. It's just absolutely amazing, this 3D amazing work. There was the Diversity Partners Network that met at Cal Poly, and this is really trying to get all the different key groups that work with diversity and try to help increase diversity and change how our community is working together. And then had the SLO Health Counts meeting on Thursday as well, and that was really the county coming together and talking about how we're going to utilize funds going forward for public health and for equity, and that was a long conversation, but really good in the end. We had the City University quarterly lunch, and Councilmember Francis and I went to that, heard what is happening with the university. They're still trucking along trying to get housing built, and we also heard their St. Patrick's Day plans, and that'll be another conversation for another day. I went to the Student Community Liaison Committee, which both Cuesta and Cal Poly are starting their election phase, so they'll be bringing in their new presidents in the next couple of month and a half, and also discuss the students' St. Patrick's Day's plans. And then lastly, I went to the Cal Cities Community Services Policy Committee, and we reviewed a lot of the upcoming legislative bills. We have a lot to kind of pay attention to, but they're not really ready yet. But homelessness was the whole second half of the conversation. It is recorded, the agenda and everything is, and the slideshow is on, or slide deck is on the webpage, and I encourage you to check it out. I'll try to get it passed out to all of you. There's some very unique plans that the County Supervisors Association of all of California would like to identify as far as roles and responsibilities for homelessness, and what they feel the city's role should be, what they feel the county's role should be, and what they feel the state role should be. So I encourage you to take a look at that. Vice Mayor Marks.
Thank you. Well, today was a big day for two of the boards that I sit on. In that, the Board of Supervisors voted to rejoin the Integrated Waste Management Authority, IWMA. Now, we can't play the film backwards, right? So we've gone through 2 years of, I'd say we went through 1 year of really kind of chaotic as an organization, trying to adjust to having the county remove itself. And we've established a really great board with just the cities and the CSDs and a stability, gotten a good executive director. And now for the county to come back to the IWMA means we have to review and revise the Joint Powers Agreement. It has to go around to all of the different jurisdictions, all of the CSDs. So it's going to be, this is the beginning of a process, okay? And I did say to the city managers, it's going to be very interesting. He got back, indeed. It's going to be interesting because we do not have to just go back to the way that it was before. And so there's a question of whole visioning aspect that's going to have to take place. And the other thing is the Board of Supervisors also today voted to join Central Coast Community Energy, 3CE. So it's the first day of spring and two really great votes of the new board majority. But also, like the IWMA, this is just the beginning of a long process. The timeline is such that it probably will take about 2 years for the county to actually start participating in terms of the residents, but they will get a seat on the board, on the policy board and on the operations board. Almost, I'd say immediately, they don't have to already be totally served by the 3CE at the point that they get to be part of the policy decision. And I think Supervisor Don Ortiz-Legg might be interested in doing that. Yeah, so this was a great day, and I definitely will keep everyone up to date as we continue, but I'm very optimistic. What I wanted to say is, if you're interested, I will email you the staff report about going back to the IWMA. It turns out that in order to make their mini IWMA, in order to fund it, it costs about $1,800,000 a year. The fees that they bring in are about $390,000. So there's like a $700,000 shortfall that is created by what the county did. And that would have to come out of the general fund, but it's not really allowed for an enterprise fund to continue to be subsidized by the general fund. So there's that, but there's some hope that when they do rejoin the IWMA, and we'll have to see how this works out, my hope would be to try to reduce the garbage rates for everybody throughout the whole county. Because with economies of scale, it might be possible. I'm not promising, but that would be a goal, to see if there's any way we can bring down the costs. Because they went up, they skyrocketed when the county left. So anyway, that's the goal, to try to make it more affordable for everyone. So thank you.
Wonderful news. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, it was a busy 2 weeks for me as well. I realized as I was starting to write down all the things I needed to update on, it was, bless you. last week was the first meeting of HSOC since I was appointed to that body, and it was kind of a fun one to have as my first because they were giving away all the CBDG funds. So our local homeless serving providers, Five Cities Homeless Coalition, CAPSLO, ECHO, Lumina, I think there were a couple others that had programs that they had applied for funds for, all got some good news that day. So that was positive. That's a committee that meets every other month, so there won't be another meeting until May. I also, with the mayor, attended the SLOMA preview for Marcella Zacharias, and it was amazing. I would highly encourage that everybody go check that out. Also, Sunday night, had the opportunity to go to the Slow Rep new season announcement where they announce all their shows for the coming season, and it looks like there's going to be some fun ones. So I would encourage people to check out their offerings on their website. On Thursday last week, attended the opening ceremony for the Wall That Heals that was in the Madonna Meadow this last weekend. Very wet time for that to be in the meadow, very sloppy and wet, but still a very, very moving tribute memorial to go see, and people were leaving belongings and mementos along the wall just as they do in Washington, D.C. So was glad I was able to view that. Had a climate coalition meeting as well as attending my first revenue and taxation committee meeting for Cal Cities. There are a lot of pieces of legislation that they're watching, and again, the slide deck and all those pieces of legislation are on their website in the slide deck. And then this past Friday, also attended on the mayor's behalf, the mayor's monthly lunch with the other mayors from the region and our assembly members representative, congressman's representative. And the topic du jour that day was storm response and recovery, as I'm sure you can imagine. So, and looking forward to this coming Thursday for the ribbon cutting for the downtown infrastructure that had to be postponed because of bad weather. So we'll cross our fingers that we get to do it this Thursday.
Thank you. Councilmember Francis.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a busy time. Had a CAPSLO board meeting last Thursday, and it was great to see both the appropriations of funds to all sorts of wonderful Head Start and homelessness programs, as well as adult day center, and then also application for grant funds being approved. So that was great. Also really enjoyed the Civic Well conference and was really wishing we had one of the tools they discussed there. We learned about the Turner Center up at Berkeley that allows you to kind of play around with various housing levers to see if you put certain incentives or policies in place, if it will, what percentage more of a chance is there of a development happening in particular parts within the city, and it uses your city's data, which is just so cool, and I'm hoping we can look into the potential of using that down the line. Also joined Councilmember Shoresman at the Wall That Heals opening ceremony, which was incredibly moving, and felt really honored to be there. And joined the mayor at the City University quarterly meeting where we discussed a lot of the big issues, including off-campus housing and the St. Patrick's Day celebrations, and how we could collaborate on all of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Pease.
Thank you so much. I also, as noted, attended the Civic Well conference at Asilomar. Senator John Laird was the keynote speaker and had a lot of great conversations about decarbonization and housing and energy storage. Cal City's Environmental Quality Committee. So there are three of us, I guess, on the Cal City's committees. Yeah. Which is awesome. Our focus on that meeting is a lot about a circular economy. Solid waste falls under that environmental quality umbrella, and legislation going forward about extended producer responsibility. So like carpet buyback, paint buyback, but going on from there in terms of batteries and plastics is really the big one now. So exciting work there. And then the Groundwater Sustainability Commission had our annual water report, which was kind of stable. You know, this was from the 2022. It's like, oh, it's stable. We're still kind of overdrafted. Nobody cared at all because we're just like, talk to us in a few months when we're testing the next round of the wells because yeah, it's been a great water year. So yeah, so pretty happy little group. That was it.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, there's the Water Conservation Challenge in April, and we're looking at that saying, okay, well, how are we going to recalibrate that? So we will see you all next April 4th at 4:30. We'll be doing the advisory recognition program reception, and then we'll be back here at 5:30 at 990 City Hall, or 990 Palm Street at City Hall for our next meeting. Thank you and good night.
Good night. Thank you all for accommodating me today.